this virtual meeting of Kensington and Chelsea's Planning Applications Committee. This evening's meeting is held in accordance with government regulations allowing councils to hold virtual meetings. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'm joined by fellow councillors this evening. Perhaps colleagues, we can just quickly introduce ourselves by putting video on and just saying hello. So first of all, I think Councillor Schmetterling, Dory, if you can just come up on screen.
Hello, this is Dory Schmetterling, Councillor for Pembridge Ward, north of Notting Hill Gate.
That's great, thank you. And then Councillor Linda Wade. Linda?
Councillor Linda Wade, Earls Court Ward Councillor.
Great. And finally, Councillor Maxwell Wood. Maxwell.
Councillor Maxwell Wood, Queensgate Ward.
Great. Now, I think that we were due to be joined by Councillor Bakhtiar, but unfortunately, I think he's unwell, so he may not be able to join us at all. That's unfortunate. But with 4 councillors present, we are quorate, so the meeting can proceed. It will be the 4 of us as we stand that will be making the decisions in front of us on the cases in front of us this evening. We're also joined by officers who will advise us. The presenting officers will be Derek Taylor. Derek, would you just like to come up and online so we can see you, hear you?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. My name is Derek Taylor, and I'll be presenting the North Area cases this evening. Thank you.
And also Matthew Woodhead. Matt, you're with us, yeah?
Yeah, hi there. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Matthew Woodhead, and I'll be presenting the South cases this evening.
Great. And this evening, the officer team is led by Lisa Chung. Lisa, would you like to just say hello as well?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Chung, and I'm the Head of Development Management. Thank you.
Great, very good. If any other officers need to speak during the evening, then I'll introduce them and explain who they are. Now, as Anne has from Governance has already said, if you aren't going to speak, if you're not about to speak, please put video off and have your microphone mute. It'll help the quality of the broadcast, I think. Can I just say, by way of introduction, that the format in a virtual meeting we follow is very similar to our normal format of a planning meeting. But I would like to emphasise that all the councillors will have seen the reports, read the reports, seen representations, and also the addendum report, which has been circulated. So that's it's important that we note that. If we can now then start the formal public agenda. So first of all, apologies for absence. Well, as I noted, unfortunately, Councillor Bakhtiar this afternoon sent me a message saying he was unwell. So I think it may well be that he is not able to be here. Next, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest? No. Are there any other declarations?
No.
No. Okay, there are none. Okay, but that's good. In that case, I think I can indicate the order of business this evening. In a few moments, we're going to start with the application at the major site at Strand House in Holbein Place. We will then consider Allen House in Allen Street, then to 23 Bywater Street. We will then move to Palace Green, Kensington Park Gardens, Sydney Street, and finally Amberwood House. I beg your pardon. So that's going to be our order of business. So in that case, if we can move on briskly, and if
Chair,
yeah, sorry,
interrupting. Yeah. Did you want to appoint a substitute in case you drop off internet-wise?
Actually, that's a good point.
Councillor Bakhtiar is not.
Yes, actually, that's a good point. Well, I would suggest, fortunately, this team software seems quite robust. But if my line drops out, then I think Maxwell and Linda, I would suggest that you ask Councillor Schmetterling, in fact, to take over in the event that my line just fails. But actually, that's a good point. Okay, so with that in mind,
that's fine.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Thank you. Very good. Okay, so in that case, if we can move to the South Pack and start with Strand House, and I think Matthew Woodhead, you're going to introduce this first case. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to bring the members' attention to the addendum report that was circulated earlier, which included some amended wording of the conditions and an additional informative, in addition to the report that you would have been presented previously. So the application site is 7 Holbein Place, and this is shown on the location plan on the left-hand side of the slide. To the north of the slide, you can see the London Tube lines and Holbein Place kind of arching around and kind of extending further south. So the development proposes the demolition of the mansard roof and the existing roof structures, and the creation of a new 4th, 5th and part 6th floor extension. The development also includes alterations to the fenestration and the creation of a roof terrace at the main roof level, some additional plant at basement level and at roof level, some green walls too, and some new landscaping works. So the picture on the right-hand side of the slide is showing the existing building looking from Holbein Place. So these plans show on the top left the existing front elevation. This is the existing situation and the proposed demolition works. On the top right hand side, this is the proposed front elevation. On the bottom left, this is the existing rear elevation, and on the bottom right, this is the proposed rear elevation. As you can see from the existing and the proposed demolition works, you can see the alterations to the fenestration, the entrance and the openings at ground floor and the upper floor levels. You can then see the hatched red line, which indicates that the mansard level will be demolished. On the right hand side, the proposed elevation, you can see that the replacement story will, it's shaded in a slightly different grey, but it will form an extension of the main elevation of the building. So the main termination of the elevation will be extended by an additional story, and then you can see the proposed new roof level story, which is in a darker grey on the right hand side at the top and bottom drawings. Then you can see the proposed roof access, which is on the proposed on the right hand plans, and this is the will provide access to the roof terrace at that level. On the right hand side, on the top right plan, you can see the plant enclosure to the right of that. And then these additional plans, so the top show the sections through the existing and proposed buildings. So again, you can see the hatched red line where the demolition is proposed of the existing mansard roof and the roof structures. And you can see the proposed additional massing and the additional stories on the right hand side. You can also see the green element, which has been identified. That is one of the green walls. That is part of the entrance, kind of the L-shaped of the building, and the green walls will be proposed to either side of the entrance element. And then to the bottom of the slide, you can see the existing view. So this is as you head from Sloane Square down into Holbein Place, and the building is in front of you. So the existing building is on the left-hand side. You can see the existing mansard with the roof structures, and on the right you can see the proposed roof level story, the additional story, and the kind of the other alterations. You can see the second green wall in that additional view. And then that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Matthew. So, colleagues, any questions about this? Linda, you've got your hand up, and then Max.
Yes, I was concerned because there didn't seem to be any representation about the impact of the rear of the building, and the number of the objectors who live behind were commenting about loss of light, sense of enclosure. The other thing that I'm concerned about is, was there any detail about the installation of the green wall, how it was going to be maintained? Because green walls are notoriously difficult to maintain. And I just wondered whether there was any further detail. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I assume so. To take your first point, in regards to the loss of the light, so the applicant has provided a daylight and sunlight assessment alongside the application. So in section 6.20 of the officer's report, it identifies the properties that were assessed as part of the assessment. And so you can see, I've gone back to the site location plan. You can see Tarnbrook Court, which extends to the south, is located to the south and extends to the east of the site. The very rear is formed of it's a kind of a service courtyard, and the properties that do face onto it. Now, like as is kind of outlined in the officer's report, a daylight and sunlight assessment was undertaken, and it demonstrated that there was one room that would fall below the BRE guidelines. Now, that room was situated in the mansard of Tarnbrook Court, but that window had room had a window that was located facing southeast. And therefore, and that obviously, because it's facing away from the development site, wouldn't have been impacted by the development. So it was concluded that that wouldn't have a harmful impact on the daylight or sunlight to that property. Again, the sense of enclosure issues have been addressed in the report. The rear is the area of the site immediately to the rear is a service courtyard. And the existing situation, obviously, with the building at present, basically, and the relationship with those properties is established. And so the additional, the replacement of the mansard itself and the additional height was deemed that it wouldn't have a harmful impact on the living conditions of those properties. In regards to the green walls, the applicant has provided a kind of outline plan of how it was going to be retained and watered and maintained, and this is obviously really important to us because it was acknowledged that if it's not maintained, that it could have a potential impact on its appearance in the long run. So they have provided information to that, and if you go through to the end of the officer's report, it has a list of conditions, and conditions will secure the further details of the maintenance of both of the green walls.
Thank you, but it's just interesting that the people who live in Bourne Street seem to have raised objections, and you haven't mentioned that wasn't covered in the light report.
So the daylight and sunlight report looked at those properties which were closest by. So in point 6.2, it does state the daylight and sunlight did look at number 79, 80, 81, 82, and 83 and 84 Bourne Street. It is also worth bearing in mind that that is over the other side of the railway tracks, and actually they have there's a greater separation distance to those properties. But but yeah, I mean, like I say, the daylight and sunlight assessment it did assess the impact on those immediately, or essentially those properties which are located closest to the application building.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Maxwell.
Hi, good evening. My question's fairly simple, to be honest. So it's obviously getting a couple more floors, and it talks in the report that this is not considered a tall building. What would be considered a tall building exactly?
That is a good question. I mean, the council have produced a tall building SPD, and it basically looks at the context of a building, and it's essentially future height. So if you look in the officer's report, again in section 6.9, it discusses the context of this application site. So to the north of Strand House, the building, there is Sloane Square House, which has two elements of 6 stories and of 8 stories. So that is, even in the proposed situation, that building is still going to be taller than the proposed building. And on the other side of Holbein Place, there's Sloane Garden Mansions, which again is read as a 7-story plus a mansard roof. So again, it's taller than the proposed building.
So I mean, I guess if it's not considered tall, then the only consideration is the design good enough? But we'll let the committee decide that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Councillor Schmetterling.
Thank you. My questions, I've got a few questions, some clarification. If we look at, in some order here, statement, what's the section called? Evaluation, 6.3, living conditions. The objectors and the objections do, a lot of them relate to loss of light and worry. And as I think was mentioned, Mr. Christopher Hassan from Tarnwood Court, we don't know what floor he's on. I mean, I couldn't see from the documentation supplied. And in this connection, point 620, daylight assessment, extensive comments, words about, but how did they do it? Did they get access to the properties? Yeah, how do they do that? 623 says, just a minute, what does it say? It speaks of demonstrating that 226 out of the 227 windows tested meet the BRE criteria, and all of the 169 rooms also met them. How did do we know how these were measured? Did they get access? How can they state it otherwise? Not so easy to get to some of these places. And in the same connection, have the objectors seen the sunlight assessment? Because of course that's saying it's all okay. So I'll just leave that complex as one question first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so to take your second point first, the daylight and sunlight assessment has been submitted as part of the application. So it was submitted at the same time as all the other documents, such as the drawings. That's been published and has been available on our website throughout the course of the application. So anyone has been able to view that. In terms of the assessment itself, so the British research establishment guidelines set out how the daylight and sunlight assessment should be undertaken, and how and essentially what impact is deemed to be harmful or not, and they kind of set out guidelines which states if an impact on a room or a window is for instance, at 0.8 times its former value, it kind of sets out whether it's harmful or not. And in addition to that, the applicant has provided they've done their own research in terms of looking at the planning history of the property and properties, which has demonstrated and informed that assessment. So taking your example of Tarnbrook Court, they provided plans from the planning history from the council's records, which showed a lot of the windows that were closest to the building served circulation space. So they served corridors, essentially linking the access to the floor level to the actual homes themselves. And so circulation space obviously doesn't have the same requirement of daylight and sunlight as, say, a living room. So the assessment that was submitted demonstrated that of the windows in the rooms that were assessed, there was that one which fell short of the BRE criteria, but for the reasons I set out earlier, and in the officer's report, because the room benefits from a window on the other side, the other elevation at the mansard roof of that building, then actually the room, which is a bedroom, would be served by adequate levels of daylight and sunlight.
Thank you. So are you saying that the measuring inspectors, if you like, the measuring people, did have access to windows that were the windows of the rooms or very near the rooms? Is that what you're saying?
Well, so
however they got there, whether from by ladder outside or from the inside, or
well, so yeah, I mean, certainly they would have accessed the service courtyard to the rear, and from that you can see the windows that are obviously most affected, because that's the windows on Tarnbrook Court that face the application building. But it's basically where there's obviously not all information is known, and they've stated in some instances where that is unknown. So, for instance, at the basement level of Tarnbrook Court. Now, the basement level of Tarnbrook Court, looking at the planning history, it's almost a case of building up the evidence base to demonstrate the impact. And so where a use is not known, they'll state it as unknown, but they then it's then good practice to assess that based on the most kind of stringent guidelines, rather than assuming that actually it doesn't have a requirement for daylight and sunlight. But I mean, the one that they identified was unknown actually served the basement level, which has parking and storage, kind of refuse storage. So
okay, and
so yeah, it's just a case of the evidence base was built up, and plans submitted, like I say, of planning history, and obviously when I went through the application and assessing the daylight and sunlight report, I also looked at the planning history and looked at our records to see the kind of uses of the buildings and the windows.
Okay, thank you. Now, related to this was the question in 632. There's a reference to a room at the front, and it's unlikely to serve a habitable room.
Yeah.
I'm just curious why. Well, I guess maybe we can't answer it, but just curious why the applicant didn't bother to find out what it is.
No. So this is actually the example which I just mentioned. Okay. And in some instances, there isn't the evidence base to research. If, for instance, planning history didn't contain kind of up-to-date, essentially relevant information regarding that. But okay, from my planning research, the research that I've undertaken, that at that basement level, there's no openings to the front of the building, and there's two to the rear, one which provides the essentially access to garages under Tarnbrook Court, and the other which I think provides access to the refuse. So that it was identified, and that was the one that was unknown. But yeah, that's why.
Thanks very much. I've got just two more related to, well, transport in the broader sense. If we go to 6.4, I was just curious at the phrasing. I mean, I think I know the answer, but I was just curious at the phrasing of 6.4. which says whether the proposals would ensure there are better alternatives to car use. I mean, given the thing is next door to Sloane Square tube station, Sloane Square and the buses and everything, there's nothing in I don't see how the proposals, the relevance of the proposals themselves making anything better. It's just the location, isn't it?
I mean, I think from your question really is looking at the methods of essentially the users visiting the office building,
Okay.
and it can. So there's certain policy requirements. So, for instance, there's no parking proposed, which is positive for us because it's reducing car use. But also there's ways that you can support the provision of other alternative uses. So, for instance, the cycle parking storage exceeds the local plan standard. The London plan standards, which facilitates the use of cycles to access the building. And in addition to that, there's facilities so people could cycle and shower and have lockers and stuff in the basement level. But also the application was submitted with a travel plan, and one is also secured by condition, and that sets out targets for future occupiers of the building to meet in terms of how the kind of modal use of getting and accessing the office building. So that sets targets for instance, cycling provision and the percentage of users that they are targeting to get to cycle, for instance, to the proposed use.
So finally, I just want to ask in respect of 642, the disabled parking. It says basically because of the removal of some spaces of off-street car parking. It says in regard to disabled parking, the council tends to resist the conversion of visitor parking bays to disabled parking, but any request for disabled bay will be considered. I mean, isn't that an invitation to ask for a disabled parking bay conversion?
So that is something that we obviously consulted our colleagues in the transport department with the application, and obviously with the provision of office and certainly the internal alterations to the building, they are providing step-free access. And so it is something that we would support those with kind of blue badges or have are unable basically to or need to be parked outside so that to improve their access to the building. But basically it's saying that it's not part of this proposals, but they would have to apply to the council's transport and highway department for that, and it will be considered outside the proposals for this basically. So this isn't being proposed under this application, but if they were to propose a blue badge parking space, it's basically saying it's something that's usually resisted, but you can apply after outside the kind of scope of this.
Thank you. I'm obviously not unsympathetic to this idea. Of course one is sympathetic to these kind of parking bays, but the thing is that they are losing several off-street bays on the premises. So in other words, pushing the responsibility for the disabled parking at least onto the public highway and the rest of the residents. That's why I'm querying it, really. That's the main reason.
And I totally understand your point, and I think that is why it's been set out and said actually we don't support the blue badge disabled parking as a result of the essentially to result in the loss of the visitor parking bays out the front of the building.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? No. Oh, okay. Well, I think in that case, I think we need to make a decision. I think there's been quite an extensive professional examination daylight and sunlight issues for neighbours, which is obviously important. But I think personally, I think we have to remember that office buildings in particular can age quite quickly, and keeping them up to date, modern, and extended and generally fit for purpose. I think that is an important aspect of promoting economic development in a medium long term way. So I think, to my mind, this is this seems a very sensible application given all the circumstances. So what I'm going to do is, the recommendation is to grant, obviously with the conditions and things attached. So I'm going to go down the list and ask everyone if you're in favour or against the recommendation. So if I can start, Dorrie, with you. Councillor Schmetterling, are you in favour of the recommendation or against?
I am in favour.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wade?
In favour.
Thank you. And Councillor Woodger?
In favour.
And I'm in favour as well. So that is granted with the conditions attached. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Chair, as pointed
Dorrie, yes.
Between the two, the item number 5 on the agenda is yes, number 5. Kensington Park Gardens is in my ward, so I'd like to step back from it. Sorry to give you so little notice, but if that's okay, I have nothing to do with it, but might be better if I step back. Do you think?
Well, I think I mean, subject to Hazel Salisbury from the legal department, subject to Hazel's advice, I think it is essentially, it's up to you if you wish to stand aside for an application. Personally, I think the fact that something's in your ward, probably it doesn't require it, but it's for you. So I completely understand. If you prefer to do that when we get to that item, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Probably I'd feel slightly more comfortable if I.
Yeah, no. As I say, it's a person. If it isn't a pecuniary interest, in which case the rules are very clear that you mustn't take part. But something like that, it's up to you to decide.
Yes, I've had no interest in. I've obviously got no financial interest. I don't know anybody there, but still, it's in my ward, and I think agrees with it, or somebody agrees with it there.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, in that case, let's move on to the next application. Now, this is the application Allen House, right at the top of Allen Street. And actually, following on from what Councillor Schmetterling has just said, this is obviously quite near to where I live, and it's actually in my own ward. This is an Abingdon ward. So I think now, Derek, you're going to introduce this, I think, aren't you? So, Derek, please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Right, the first slide I'm showing there just indicates Allen House at the centre of the slide by the red arrow. I think most members will be familiar with the building. It's a 6-storey mansion block just to the south of Kensington High Street. And that's the front elevation, so that's the main elevation to the building facing west. That view is looking east across Allen Street to the main elevation. You can see there it's a very fine building, and that elevation in particular makes a very positive contribution to the character of the area. The proposal before you is to retain that elevation, just refurbishing it, and then to demolish the building and rebuild it behind the front elevation, but retaining all the key features of the front as you see there. I'll just cycle through some aerial shots just to give you a bit of context. You can see there Allen House is the sort of L-shaped building directly at the centre of the slide. And you can see Adam and Eve Mews on the right-hand side of the slide, and then Kensington High Street up at the top of the slide. You can see there that Allen House is the tallest building in its immediate vicinity. And there's another view of it just to the left of the centre of the slide. And you can see already that the existing building clearly is much taller than the rest of the buildings in Allen Street, at least until you get down to the church. And another aerial shot looking almost straight down onto it. That's a useful one to see the relationship between the existing building and Eden Close. You'll see Eden Close has been discussed in the report in a number of places, and you can see it there immediately to the left of Allen House, towards the lower part of the image. And that's an example of an existing floor plan, basically a typical floor plan of the existing building. And it's just worth looking at the arrangement of the walls and the windows, and you can see the shape and form of the building. That's a demolition plan showing the demolition of the vast bulk of the building behind the retained front facade. The extent of demolition is exactly the same as in the 2016 planning permission that you've seen discussed in the report. There's no additional demolition over the 2016 permission. Mentioning the 2016 permission, I just thought I'd put a slide in here just to illustrate what one of the key differences, in fact, the single largest difference between the 2016 permission and the application now before you. The 2016 permission there is seen on the left-hand image, and you can see that there's a full single basement story, which is a car park with a car stacker that you can just make out towards the right-hand side of the building. And then in the proposed building, most of that, well, certainly just over half of that basement excavation has now been removed. It's quite a significant change because obviously the smaller excavation means less soil to be removed and therefore less vehicles and also less construction time. That's just a larger section showing the proposed building. And you can see there that the basement at the lower level, just under the building for the rear half of the building. That plan is useful just to compare the existing footprint, which you can see there in the bold red line, with the footprint of the proposed building. So I think that the two key points to note from that slide are, you can see at the top of the slide, you see the rear elevations of Eden Close, and you can see the existing footprint reaches much closer to Eden Close than the proposed one. You can see it's pulled back there quite significantly. On the southern side of the building, the depth of the building has been increased, and you can see there that there is some increase in depth with some new windows on the side, but still retaining a garden area behind. Now, these are just some more existing and proposed images, and that's obviously the front elevation, and you can see the existing building to the left and then the proposed building to the right. If you look at the left-hand image very closely, you can just see above the roof line, you can see a couple of little blue lines. And those little wire lines show you the extent of the proposed roof that you can then see in the montage in the right-hand image. So you can just see there in the perspective image that there are a couple of dormer windows at the upper level in a double mansard style. And then another existing and proposed. So that's the view north up Allen Street. And you can see the existing building on the left and then the proposed building on the right. And the same again, this time looking up Adam and Eve Mews towards the northwest, existing on the left and then the proposed on the right. And then looking sort of across from Eden Close, you can see the existing Allen House behind Eden Close there in the left-hand image. And then you can see the proposed Allen House in the right-hand image. The red line above the proposed image shows the height of the existing building. And so you can see there the reduction in height at the rear in comparison with the proposed building. These are the actual drawings as opposed to montages and images. So that's the proposed front elevation. That's the proposed north elevation with Allen Street there to the right of that image. And then the proposed east elevation, you could call that the rear elevation. And then the proposed south elevation. And that's the proposed basement plan. So as I explained earlier, the basement is now in a much reduced form, essentially just containing some cycle parking and ancillary space towards the rear of the site. And that's the proposed ground floor plan. You can see there at the top part of the image, closest to Eden Close, that there are two sort of outdoor areas there. The right-hand one, if you can see the circle in the green, that's the retained pagoda tree that would be protected throughout the development process. And then the proposed first floor plan, so you can see there it's already less than the existing, and that's just the proposed roof plan. The point of showing that plan is just so you can understand how the plant for the building would actually be central to the roof and sunken down within it. So that's a way of hiding the plants up at high level. And then you can see solar panels there, the dark rectangles. And those two images show the sort of north-east and east-facing sides of the proposed building. The brickwork there, I would suggest, looks a little bit on the sort of bland side. But that's just the images. Don't think that the brickwork would actually look exactly like that. 2 points to make on this. I mean, a stock brick is actually proposed in the applicant's documentation, which obviously is a typical brick for the area. And then there's a condition requiring samples to be agreed for all brickwork and external materials. And then that's a visualization of the east elevation. You can see there the pagoda tree to the left of that image. And that was the last slide, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Derek. Thank you for that. So we've got quite a few people have registered to speak. So if we can start with the objectors. Now, I think I have Barry Munday, Mrs. Tucker, Mr. Parr, and Mr. Tumbu. So I think, I hope you've been able to agree how you're going to split up your time, but between the four of you, you've got up to 5 minutes, and it's up to you really how you split up that 5 minutes. But perhaps if you could first just introduce yourselves quickly, if you're able to come up on video and just we can see you, and then when you're ready, please go ahead.
Hello, Chairman. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Michael Parr, one of the objectors, and I will only take 1 minute, Chairman.
Okay, all right, very good.
Hello, I'm Barry Munday. I'm Chair of ESSA. I'd probably take probably about half the allotted time, if that's okay.
Okay, all right. And Mrs. Tucker, are you able to join us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
very
good. Okay, thank you. And Tundu Nimbu, are you here as well?
Yes, hello, Mr. Chairman. I would take probably a minute. So
okay, all right. Well, I tell you what, that all sounds very good. So maybe Barry, if you start off, and then we'll and then everyone can follow on. That would be great. Barry, okay, please.
Thank you, Chairman. obviously the reduced basement area would be welcome, but we believe after all this time, if we're having a rethink, the rethink should go much further. Over the past 6 years, attitudes towards the climate emergency, zero carbon, air quality, fire safety and the value of green spaces have changed enormously. To use the council's own words, we should build healthier, cleaner, fairer and more sustainable places to live and reconnect with nature. We'd like to see these objectives implemented at Allen House. So we really have 5 key points. We would rather renew than rebuild. We believe the first option should always be to reuse buildings which are structurally sound. This reduces CO2 emissions, it saves embodied energy, is respectful to the conservation area, and it's much less disruptive to local living. Secondly, reduce car travel. We don't agree that allowing 29 of the larger homes to apply for resident parking permits is acceptable or necessary in an area with excellent public transport connections. This is essentially additional new development replacing previous short-term accommodation. We therefore believe it should be permit-free as per policy CT1. Thirdly, providing more affordable homes. The local plan requires 35% on-site affordable housing. The current financial offer of around 2 million, by my calculation, would only fund around 8 units, not including any land purchase costs. There doesn't seem much point in having a policy which is repeatedly defeated by viability calculations using high levels of specification and land value. The fourth point is provide more open space. The scheme has a low proportion of balconies or terraces, whereas the London plan says all new homes should have them. The amount of usable open space is confined to 2 small grassed areas, measuring approximately 105 square metres in total, completely inadequate for 45 flats, many of which are large family-sized units. This will be all the more important in a post-COVID. And our final point is really regarding fire safety. Fire safety should be demonstrated at the application stage as required by the London plan, rather than held over as a planning condition. The applicants have said their consultant sees no difficulty, so why can't his plan be shared now so that we can all be reassured that the building will be fire safe? We've made all these points and others at greater length in our written objection, and we'd urge the committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Who'd like to go next?
Should I go first?
I'm happy to do that, Chairman. If you're Jackie, you want to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that me or Jackie?
All right.
Jackie.
Okay.
Jackie, you go
Thank
first.
You. I'll read it as fast as I can. My contribution concerns the driving force that initiated the planning application, the unit number to retain at Allen House. The initial proposal was to refurbish the existing building in 2014 with 37 new apartments, which was unacceptable by the planning officers who insisted on the retention of 45, the unit number. That gave the green light to apply for redevelopment of the site. Now, 6 years later, after several applications, withdrawals and a lapse of permission, you are to decide. My argument is, how can 45 flats divided up from 25 family apartments in the 1980s without planning permission now be the essential unit number to retain? They've only been used for temporary holiday service flat lets. And how can 45 holiday lets be defined by the same meaning as permanent residents? The RPKC cannot use the unit number of residences, we know, but Allen House has not provided permanent accommodation for 35 years. No parking permits have been issued as no one is a permanent resident there. There are no individual, there are doorbells, sorry. Using the unit number has driven the applicants to apply for construction of a larger, bulky building. Destruction of
I'm going to have to stop. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to. Time is short. I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you for those points. I'm going to allow Mr. Parr and Mr. Tumbo to just, if you would like to say a sentence or two, because time is more or less.
Chairman, I can't do that. I've spent a lot of time preparing a 1 minute submission, so I'd be very grateful if you'd give me 60 seconds of your time.
Well, I'll okay. Okay, go ahead quickly.
Thank you.
As quick
Thank you very much. This is one of a number. This is one of a number of withdrawn or expired applications since 2015. So the current scheme is a new application, not a variation of approved one. As Barry has mentioned, no affordable housing is offered. The developer has retained a PR firm, but no local resident has been consulted. The developer's own report predicts cracks of up to 5 millimeters in the walls of surrounding dwellings, but no solution or other mitigation is proposed. The facade would be retained, it's true, but the block as a whole is structurally sound and of good appearance. The demolition of the remaining Hoffman building is unwarranted. It will generate a significant carbon footprint and cause environmental and heritage damage in a conservation area in breach of RBKC's own rules. Refurbishment of the interior with reinstatement of the original 25 apartments is the correct solution, rather than expansion of an already bulky building upwards and outwards to accommodate 45 new ones. The application should please be refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Tumbo, if you would like to say a sentence or two, and there may be questions, of course, afterwards.
Fine, Mr. Chairman, would like to say that it's going to create unacceptable noise and disruption over a number of years, producing excessive dust, preventing a proper ventilation, which is critical, especially in these particular times. We, as a small college, hold 3 public exams each year, and that would certainly cause disruption. And finally, we are known as a safe haven for a number of vulnerable students, and we certainly wouldn't want anything going on around us that would disrupt that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. That's very good. Thank you all of you for those comments. Now, if I can now invite the applicant and the applicant's advisors to join us. Now, I've allowed people objecting to the scheme a little bit more time, so I'm going to allow you the same amount of time, obviously. So I think Merrick Bagalay, is that right? And Clark Heron and Dan File of DP9. Are you able to join us? So I don't know, would you like to, again, introduce yourselves? And when you're ready, please go ahead, and you'll have up to, well, 6-7 minutes, actually, in fact.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. I'm Merrick Bagalay from Bentle Green Oak, advisors to the owners of Allen House. First and foremost, I'd like to fully endorse and welcome the recommendation to approve the application as set out in the committee report. Our team has worked closely with officers and local stakeholders throughout both the pre-application and post-submission stages to ensure that our proposals for Allen House deliver the best housing scheme possible for both the borough and the local area and address some of the concerns relating to the previous consent. As noted in the report, the previous consent to the building granted by this committee in 2016 remains a material consideration and provides the context for this application. The application before you this evening is, to all intents and purposes, a resubmission of the previous with some significant improvements facilitated through minor amendments to the previously consented scheme. This is all delivered while retaining the previously consented bulk and massing. I'd like to draw your attention to some of the changes we have made to the previous scheme that was consented. By removing the basement car park in line with the near unanimous view of local stakeholders through our extensive public consultation programme, we can deliver significant public benefits, including no required pavement crossover and car park entrance into the existing facade, a 75% reduction in vehicle movements associated with the excavation, and a reduction in the overall construction programme by 3 months. This removal of basement car parking has also enabled us to provide an additional residential unit within the scheme, increasing the total number of units to 45, thereby re-providing the existing number of homes found at the site today. It also allows us to pull the basement back from the facade at the front and from the neighbouring properties at Eden Close to the rear. The minimum separation distance between the rear building lines of Allen House and Eden Close properties will be doubled from the existing 5.9 metres to the approximate 12 metres. We have also agreed to reduce the current permit eligibility from all 45 units to just 29, a reduction of circa 36%, and one which the committee report notes will ensure that the development will not result in any material increase in parking demand. The application will deliver a significant improvement in the quality of homes provided at Allen House, especially in terms of daylight, access and sustainability. In addition, we have agreed a payment in lieu approximately £900,000 in excess of current council policy requirements and have offered to retain our previous even higher contribution from the previously consented scheme. We have also agreed a more than tenfold increase in the remaining Section 106 contributions from the previous consent, rising from approximately £29,000 to over £300,000 for public art, skills, training, and local public realm improvements, in addition to the required community infrastructure levy liability payment. The scheme also delivers on sustainability, with further carbon reductions made through the introduction of more PV panels, a carbon offset payment, 74 dedicated cycle spaces, and increased landscaping across the site when compared to the previously consented scheme. I'd now like to address a couple of the queries that were raised this evening. The first thing is to say that Allen House is no longer holiday lets. The building is occupied entirely as long-term tenants under assured short-hold tenancy agreements. The second thing I'd like to address is regarding the need for demolition behind the retained facade and carbon. It's a subject close to my heart and it's one that we look at very carefully. Allen House once provided 24 substantial mansion flats, but a history of subdivision has resulted in a series of small, poorly configured and outdated units that do not meet modern standards or requirements. There is a single lift that does not accommodate prams or wheelchairs. Many of the existing flats rely on a tiny light well, meaning that in the existing building, 8 flats fail BRE internal daylight requirements. There is no cycle storage. We have flats that are an EPC F, meaning we can't even let them. They are so poorly performing in sustainability terms. The historic footprint of the building and extent of these problems makes refurbishment an unviable option, as units would still not be able to meet modern standards within the existing footprint. Whole life carbon analysis has shown that when a building is as poorly performing as this, then a rebuild can actually be beneficial in operational terms within as few as 6 years. We have increased the PV cells on the building. In addition, the inclusion of 74 bike parking spaces and removal of basement car parking will promote sustainable and active travel methods. As such, a redevelopment behind the existing facade is entirely the right thing to do for the environment. The proposals before you today are the culmination of years of careful work with residents, stakeholders, planning officers, and indeed comments made previously by the committee 4 years ago. We have listened and improved the scheme based on those comments, all within the previously consented massing. We are proud of the proposals and believe they will allow a historic local building to better serve the community, and I urge members to support the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any queries you may have.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much indeed for that. Councillor Woodshire and Maxwell, if you please remember to say who you're addressing your question to. So, Maxwell.
Hi, good evening. My question is to the applicant. It's mainly regards to the CTMP plan in terms of, I understand there's, you mentioned a reduction in the number of vehicle movements. I think I've seen about 40 vehicles a day, I think is estimated now. Can you talk to me a bit more in terms of the type of vehicles that will be used? I mean, how big are these things, and the movement of with the CCMP?
Well, a detailed construction traffic management plan will be submitted and agreed with officers through a pre-commencement condition. So this will seek to address the comments that have been made by the highways officer within the committee report and those identified construction traffic related issues. The servicing of the building is proposed to be entirely up Allen Street. And the committee report, I think it's paragraph 6.5, concludes that the draft CTMP that we have submitted is broadly acceptable. And the thing I've mentioned and I'd like to restate is that by reducing the basement, we're further away from other buildings now, and the overall construction programme, and therefore will be 3 months shorter, but also therefore most importantly to your question, there'll be 75% fewer lorries required associated with the basement works. So that's 75% fewer lorries going up and down Allen Street, and over a 3 month shorter period. We've worked very hard through public consultation to address the concerns, many concerns that residents had on this matter, and we believe that the submission deals adequately with those concerns.
And then, can I do a follow up to those objecting in terms of what would you find acceptable in terms of numbers of vehicles per day?
What would we find?
I mean, no. This is to the objectors.
Michael. Can I can't give you the dimensions, but I did look at this last time round, and I calculated that that vehicles would not be able to pass if you measure the from pavement to curb of Allen Street in particular. Vehicles would not be able to pass each other. No vehicle could pass, even if a one-way system is executed, which I guess is still the plan. Can the advocate tell me whether there's still a one-way system in operation in Allen Street or not? Secondly, all of the disabled spaces would have to be suspended, I think, from sort of crude measurements, and that really is from memory. So my view is not so much about the numbers of movements, which would be inevitable and obviously disruptive to High Street Ken traffic and Scarsdale Villas, Abingdon Villas, Stratford Road, etc. But it was also, I imagine, cause choke points all the way down Allen Street, particularly at the top.
Okay. If I can, sorry, can I just come in there? Mr. Park, thank you very much for that. You really, under our rules, you're not allowed to cross-examine, so to speak. But I think in the circumstances, I think it's a fair point. I think Councillor Woodger, it is exactly what Councillor Woodger was interested in. So I think if the applicant, if you would like to respond to that, I think it would be helpful. Yeah.
Apologies, Chairman.
No, it's all right. Don't worry. But no, if the applicant, if you're able to respond to that, that would be helpful, I think, actually.
Sure, and I think I obviously don't have the details of our draft construction traffic management plan to hand, but as I said, it's a draft construction management plan that has been deemed, in the committee report to be broadly acceptable, and as part of the conditions associated with this application, a detailed construction traffic management plan will need to be submitted in conjunction with the contractors when they are on board, and that will need to be agreed with officers. So whatever proposals we have, be that a one-way system if that really is required, be that the suggested temporarily suspending the disabled parking bays for a short period of time, they will all need to be agreed. It's not something that we can just do. We must agree with officers, and we'll need to be very careful about what we do, and obviously have in mind what people are saying this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Wade, I think you had a question.
Yes, I have two questions. I must say that this is probably, given the front, is really quite an exceptional piece of architecture. I find the back, frankly, rather boring, disappointing, the fenestration's rather dull and the brickwork, even if it's going to be shown at a later stage, doesn't seem to have any of the monumentality of the front. So I think that it's almost a schizophrenic building. You are just leaving a shell at the front, and that is, to my mind, slightly sad. So if you could just talk me through the interior of the building, how much of the original interior, if you stripped away you said it was originally 24 flats?
Yes, that's correct.
And then was subdivided over the years. What have you still maintain that even if you took that out, you couldn't reconfigure the building and meet the present day standards?
Correct. We've obviously done a very detailed analysis on this, because that would obviously be the first step in any analysis. And as I said, at present, the building is only designed with one lift. That lift does not accommodate.
But could you not? I mean, there are adaptations. You could replace a lift, couldn't you? You could replace a lift, but actually, what I'm saying about how much of the decoration, how much of the is there moulding on the ceilings? What is the condition? What is the condition of the interior?
Okay.
Doors.
Is now exiting.
So, right, the existing building, there are very few, if any, period features retained in the building, and that is principally because when the building was designed, it was designed as 24 flats, and those have been split and split again in some instances to the 45 that we've got now. During the 1970s and 80s, where there was little control over how they were split and what was retained. This building is not listed, so there was nothing to prevent people historically ripping stuff out. There is literally nothing left in this building, which is one of the key reasons why we believe a retained facade scheme is the right solution.
So you acknowledge the fact that they were large mansion blocks, and then they were subdivided, and it comes down to what you said was actually quite small units, 45 units. So the sizes of the flats aren't going to be that large.
Correct, and it's worth stating that some of those original 24 flats.
No, the ones that you're proposing aren't going to be that large.
Oh, sorry. Yes, all of the proposed flats will comply with the planning policies as required. That's one. So at the moment, a lot of the flats do not comply with size requirements. The proposed all comply with size requirements.
And moving forward on to the gritty problem of parking permits. Allen Street must be along with the street alongside it.
Moreno is now joining.
As a lot of people joining. Actually, are probably two of the most difficult streets to park in Kensington and Chelsea. I would quite like to know where these additional people are going to park.
The key is that it isn't additional people. The existing building has 45 flats. All of those flats are eligible for parking permits. What we're actually saying with the proposed 45 flats, so 45 flats to 45 flats with the proposed, we're actually willing to limit, to reduce by 36% the number of flats that can apply for parking permits. So in our view, it's actually a reduction, and certainly the committee report confirms that there'll be no increase in parking stress on Allen Street.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Schmetling.
Thank you. I'll just lower my hand. Right. I've got a question or two for the applicants and for the objectors. So I'd like to start with the applicant. This is perhaps not a planning issue directly, but one of the objectors, at least, did actually raise the question of fire safety. I think it was Mr. Mundy from ESSA. What are the provisions, just for my own information, and or are you going to submit a plan to build a control on exits, lifts, and where the fire extinguishers are and all that sort of thing? That's one point.
Okay, would you like me to answer that now?
Yes, please. Now.
Yes, absolutely. So a pre-commencement condition, so we cannot do anything at all on this site, is to submit a full fire strategy statement to planning officers to be agreed. That will include all of the relevant measures as required by building control, by policy, by law, and we are very confident we can address that. The reason we don't have one as part of the application is it simply wasn't a requirement under policy when we submitted the application. So that's why it's being dealt with by condition.
Because I think the new rules, the fire safety, can't remember if it's an order or an act, hasn't gone through Parliament yet, and nor have the building safety regulations, the new ones. But of course, we know what's in them. So I trust that the applicant has paid regard to what's emerging.
Correct. We do have a fire safety consultant as part of the team, and they have been on board throughout the whole of these proposals. We have sprinklers. We'll pay careful attention to the materials specified. Yes, we're very confident we can comply with all of that legislation.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that's my questions to you, to the applicant. I'd like to ask the objectors. Oh, by the way, sorry, one more question. I'm just curious. I mean, this is an application. We deal with what's there. But actually thinking about at least one remark made by one of the objectors is, at least on some of the facades, why didn't you put balconies in? I mean, you could have them sticking out, couldn't you, in some tasteful way? I mean, the facade we're looking at right now. I was just curious why that wasn't considered, given that you've got a garden below and space, and is that open to the neighbours?
I don't. Obviously, for those of you who are familiar with this site, there was a quite detailed planning history to this site in 2016 that resulted in a planning consent. And as such, we've chosen in this instance simply to retain the bulk and massing of the application and not change that. And we didn't want to provoke people in terms of potential overlooking or anything like that. We wanted to maintain the bulk and massing that was consented previously, and really not cross that bridge, if you like.
Okay, thank you very much. Now for the objectors, I've got 2 or 3 here. The first one is, obviously several objections were raised on grounds of lack of affordable housing. Well, I don't like the word affordable here. I just call it below market rent, or below market prices, in this case rents, I guess. Only one of them referred to, one of the objections actually referred to the response that it's only 2 that were proposed. I mean, did the other objectors notice that the reason for rejection by the registered providers, the housing associations, wasn't, I mean, it was not just it was 2, it was too small, wrong location, couldn't deal with it, and so on. So given that, maybe your objections are not so strong anymore, because it isn't just it was 2, it's the whole circumstances they seem not to like. So that's one question to the objectors. The second thing is, you heard the presentation from the applicant about the changes, the reduction of permits from 45. I did hear, of course, objections saying, well, because there's short-term lets, therefore, very few of the 45 flats took up permits, but we've heard that actually it's now longer-term let. So anyway, given that, and given the presentation made, first of all, did you get any documents about the explicit changes, and do they give you some comfort that it's not so bad as you might have thought it would be? And those are my 2 questions. And I would just like to add a comment. Some people have said they talked about all the disruption that's going on around them, new construction projects on High Street and so on. I can just express my sympathies. Where I live, I've had projects going all around for years. They've just stopped. But I think we can't avoid it if we live in central London. But anyway, my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know. Can I ask Barry Munday? Are you still on the call? Or Mr. Parr? I don't know.
Yeah,
would you like
Mr.
to
Chairman,
respond at all? I mean, it may be difficult.
I can't respond with any
No.
authority on these points. I was hoping Barry would actually deal with the first point on affordable housing for us, because we're just aware of the intense shortage of housing in London generally. I mean, the figures are truly horrendous, as you know very well. And the various plans in place from Mr. Khan and others have not delivered the required housing for less well-off people. And I think generally our feeling was, we do not. We may sound snobbish, we're not. We would not object to having. Indeed, I lived in Fulham for many years, where actually the majority of my neighbours were, socially housed. So it's nothing new for me, and I think it's just a great pity that such a big opportunity. And I understand all the economics and so forth. Barry understands it much better than me. To miss that opportunity with a new build that's been hanging around since 2015 is a great pity. That was simply my point. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Actually, I think probably I might take up a couple of these points with officers when we move on. But colleagues, any other questions to either the applicant or objectors?
Well, sorry, Mr. Chair, I just want to ask that nobody wants to comment on my second point, which was about the information given in the presentation of the applicant, and whether because one or two of these documents were submitted in the last minute, whether the objectors, any of them, don't mind who, saw them, and if they take any comfort from them and maybe reduce their objections. Given the way the construction is planned, seeing that the bulk isn't quite so dramatic from all facades and so on, certainly compared to the previous expired permission.
Mr. Chairman, could I just very quickly, Jackie may have something to say, but I would just like to say that the councillor is quite right. There are, if you like, mitigations to perhaps to the full impact of the construction methods and so on. And yes, I think we are aware of that. But if you listened, and which I know you did, to our, at least to my submission, it's actually about a point of principle in dealing incorrectly with this building, despite all the logistical difficulties it would throw up and so on. And it just seems to be a continuation of the 2015 plan, without actually having the major rethink which it deserves. So such mitigations are not, I think, of great comfort to local residents. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you very much indeed for that. Colleagues, any further questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to a different part of the meeting, which is where members of the committee can discuss the application with officers, and then we will move on further to make a decision. Who would like to go first with any questions to officers? No? Okay, well, in that case, I'll make a start actually with a couple of questions, Mr. Taylor, to you. First of all, I think I've got a couple of questions. First of all, can we address the status of the previous application, which I think is expired, but it is obviously modern in terms of planning policies. The second issue is some of these images, I'm looking at one now, is of what looks like a very modern kind of light bricked office building, which is rather bold, and I'm wondering about that issue. And then the third issue, which I think is important to me, is the one of how many parking permits that the scheme, if it was to be agreed, would have. I think it's been explained that the short-term lets, there were 45 short-term lets. In principle, all 45 could have a parking permit. However, it's being suggested 29. That's, to my mind, that's still quite a large number. I'm wondering if there would be any scope for us properly as a committee to suggest a slightly lower number. I don't know, Derek, do you want to address those 3 points? And I'm sure my colleagues will have further points, actually.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Well, first of all, on your first question relating to the status or the amount of weight that should be accorded to the previous permission, in short, it is a very significant material consideration. The previous permission obviously has expired. It actually expired in the first part of this year. But when it was granted in 2016, it was granted against policies that actually haven't changed in any significant way since then. Since 2016, obviously the London plan has moved on, and particularly for the boroughs plan, the old consolidated local plan of 2016 has now been replaced with the local plan 2019. When our new development plan came in last year, I mean, there were various changes, obviously, to a number of policies, but actually the policies that relate to new development, to development in conservation areas, all the sort of main policies that were applied in 2016, they've really been carried through into the new plan without any significant change at all. Sitting above all of that, the statutory tests for assessing development in conservation areas are identical to those that pertained in 2016. So in the reality is that actually, yes, we have a new plan, and yes, that the old planning permission has expired, but really the vast majority of the points and policies upon which the original permission turned are actually the same now. So significant weight needs to be given to the granting of permission against effectively the same policies only 4 years ago. On your second question, yeah, I mean, I think the visualizations are very useful in terms of creating an image of the new building behind the front facade. But obviously in these visualizations, you really can't pick up any detail. As I mentioned in the presentation, I mean, the applicants in their design and access statement describe their likely proposed brick as actually being a London stock, which of course is the dominant brick in Kensington and Chelsea. And I think that would be absolutely the right choice. I mean, it's very difficult to draw a London stock in images at this sort of scale. But if you can imagine that in a London stock, clearly it would look a bit different to the visualization there that's just been drawn on the computer. Very important to note condition 3 as recommended, which actually does require samples of all the materials, including the stonework and the brickwork and so on, to be submitted for approval by the local planning authority, just so we can be sure of the brick, be sure of the pointing, and be sure of the stonework. Your third question related to the matter of parking permits. Now, the figure that was arrived at after a lot of discussion with our highways officers was that 16 of the units would be permit free, and then 29 of the units would be eligible for permits. That wasn't a figure that was just plucked out of the sky, though. I mean, there's actually, I mean, the report sets it out a bit in paragraph 662. That there are formulae for actually calculating car ownership across homes. These figures were based on an average car ownership of 0.41 per dwelling across 1, 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings. Now, I'm not going to try and drill further into that, but there was a lot of discussion over quite a period of time with our highways officers, and that they rather than pluck a figure out, they wanted to actually calculate find a reasonable way to calculate the right number. So the number of 29 is the result of that quite lengthy process.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Mr. Taylor? Linda, Councillor Wade.
Come back to the use of materials. In the picture that you showed of Eden Close, I think the top roof area, which is a very white area, do we know what materials that seemed to be very stark? What material is that going to be made out of? So you see,
is this the image there that you're thinking of?
Yes,
that's looking across Eden Close.
Yeah, actually this is quite a good picture, because if you look at the windows, for example, you've got the repeat of the red brick over the window of the Victorian style, which ties in with the brickwork on the front. And when you look at the picture on the left-hand side, you see the red London brick come far further back. And actually the yellow London stock brick is a really quite a subordinate part of the material of the building. Whereas now the yellow London brick is really quite dominant. I know it's going to age, and I think that brick is the best material, but it really does stick out. Also, that when you look at the picture on the right, I'm not sure whether it's the right terminology, but the mansard, the area that would be the mansard, which is grey, does seem to be really very dominant.
Right. Well, through you, Chairman, I think that as I mentioned before, I think the first thing to point out there is that all of the external materials have been set aside for approval under Condition 3. Now, within that, there obviously would be flexibility to decide exactly what type of brick would go where. Personally, and I'm only giving this as a personal opinion because I don't have my conservation team sitting beside me, but I personally do like the idea of bringing in a few small places, bringing in some reds to actually to tie in with both the front elevation and also with Eden Close. That there would be a number of ways to bring reds in. We've probably seen buildings where you can introduce red brick, perhaps around a window reveal. That's a technique which is sometimes used.
I think that would be more in keeping.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with you, and I think that would be a good way to stitch in the elevations with the front elevation and also with Eden Close. I wouldn't want to prescribe at this point exactly how that should be done, but certainly that's something I think that I'm sure could be explored as we're looking at the submissions eventually for Condition 3. I mean, I actually quite like the idea of doing that. I can't ask my conservation colleagues, but my guess is that they might well agree as well. So we don't know what the applicant would think of that, but my guess is that they would also be willing to look at that. So I think there would be ways to do that. In terms of the roof, obviously the top part that you see there in the image is actually the rooftop plant enclosure. And again, that's set aside in the conditions, so we can be sure of the material. I'd actually argue that the correct colour for that would be a sort of mid-grey or light grey. Unfortunately, that's the colour of our skies more often. And I think a light grey or a mid-grey would actually sit best at the roof. something darker would stand out more and something lighter would stand out more. So in my view, that's probably about the right colour to go for.
I have an additional question then. If that's the area for the plant, we get on to my pet subject, which is air conditioning and extraction and machinery. So presumably, is that going to be where it's going to be housed?
Yes. All of the...
and have we got estimates of noise, and acoustic housing for everything?
Yes, we do. As part of the application submissions, the applicants included a full acoustic survey and noise reports, which has been approved by our environmental health, noise and nuisance officers. Obviously that there are conditions attached to ensure that the eventual equipment would stay within the prescribed limits. All of the equipment, I'm showing there the proposed roof plan, and you can see at the centre of the roof, that's where all of the equipment would be included. So effectively to be behind the sort of sloping upper part of the roof.
Do you mean where the lines are?
The dark rectangles that you see there are actually the solar panels. But if you look at the central section of the roof, if you look closely, you can start to work out. I can't really blow this up, I'm afraid, but you can see the plant and equipment is right in the centre of the roof.
Right.
So that's up at the 7th story level.
So this is unique insofar as it's actually within the body of the building.
It's not unique. It's a solution which, you do see it on new buildings such as this. I mean, it's very difficult to do that in an extended or converted building. But it's actually putting the plant up on the roof and sort of often it's a fake mansard that you just see on the outside, and that's a way of hiding the plant at the centre. It's a technique which is not uncommon, actually.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Dorry, do you have a question or two?
Indeed, thank you. Let me just lower the hand, or forget later. Right, I mean, there's sort of different subjects here. But first of all, just to follow on from Councillor Wade's question about the brickwork, I first wanted to say that I had, in the little block I live in, quite a large party wall with the next property, and they offered to rebuild it when they were rebuilding their whole property. The old wall was sort of reddish, mix of red and quite grotty, a London brick of some sort mostly. And it was rebuilt in yellow London stock brick and reused bricks. And I have to say it was much better than I thought it would be. And it had orangey, reddish bricks in there mixed in because it's it's reused. I can't say recycled because obviously they haven't been destroyed and reconstituted. They're reused bricks. And the effect is actually quite good. And there's no deliberate dark red bricks in it. Now, I know this is a big building and not a large party wall, but I just thought I'd mention it because the effect was quite good, better than I expected anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
yeah.
in this context, I wanted to say, isn't part of the side of the building, I think the south side, isn't that also red brick? I mean, what's going to be retained? We're speaking of the front facade, but are we going to retain anything other than the Allen Street frontage? Do you know? I mean, so obviously you know, sorry. That's my first question.
Right. Well, no, the previous planning permission and this one essentially involves the retention of the front elevation and then just the returns to that front elevation. But the secondary flanks on both sides and the rear would all be demolished, as in the existing permission.
Right. Oh, that's why the return. I mean, that means a metre or two, presumably, because the return, at least one of them look. When you're putting up the pictures, they look of the same brick as the front elevation.
Yes, if I take you back to...
yeah, that was one.
Yeah, so if you look at that demolition image there, that's the south elevation. And you can see there what I mean by the returns. So if you look to the left of the image, where you can see the tall sort of pediment standing up on the top of the front elevation. And then that shows the extent of the return elevation on the side. And then everything to the right-hand side of that would be demolished and rebuilt.
Could you please put back, you have an actual photograph, an image of something like that. We whizzed through it. Yeah, this one here.
Sorry.
No, that will do. Yeah, this one. You can see there is, maybe that's just the return we're looking at. That's red brick.
Yes, it is. You can see on the to the left of the chimney there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Oh, so that's going to be retained. Okay, fine.
Yes, it would be.
Thank you. Okay, that's one. Second question is to do with the construction traffic management plan, etc. And this is the question of the direction of the traffic. I think is a very valid point about cars not necessarily being able to pass the builders' lorries. And I presume, can we put that as a condition, or that we bear this in mind when we actually examine the final plan that's submitted? So I think that's a very valid point. I mean, the applicant did say, if necessary, they will introduce a one-way system.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is certainly a very valid matter. I mean, at this stage, obviously, it's very difficult to predict. I mean, if planning permission is granted, then that planning permission would be valid for 3 years. So it'd be very, very difficult to predict what the local road conditions could be like in 3 years' time. In particular, there could be other building sites, and that would obviously have that could have a huge influence on how construction traffic might have to behave. Approaching and departing from this site. So it's very, very difficult to predict at this stage. The highways officers have obviously made a number of recommendations to the draft plan, but really at this stage they can't do much more than that, because the prevailing conditions at the time of the final construction traffic management plan would really be the key to it all. And only then would it be possible to determine exactly what one-way operation would need to be employed.
Okay, thanks. But that one could bear that in mind when one actually, if permission is granted,
yes, definitely.
Subject to that sort of thing. Okay, fine.
Definitely. Right. The committee obviously sometimes the committee requests that a CTMP is brought back to the committee for approval. So that would obviously be an option open to you in this case.
Chair, I think we heard that. Now, my final question.
Okay.
The final question is on the consultees. I just want to understand the implications of the two. That's Thames Water, who actually aren't happy at all, but say that they're not going to try and stop it. And the second is the Historic England objection, which says that it could cause harm to archaeological remains, and they want an evaluation, a field evaluation, to determine appropriate mitigation. And then they put in however, and so on. So what does that mean exactly, please?
Well, taking the last part of that first, obviously Historic England didn't raise any particular objection to the proposals, but they obviously have made recommendations with regard to archaeology. Conditions 27 and 28, if you want to look at those in your report pack, are actually very detailed conditions. And that they're actually, if you look at condition 27, it's a pre-commencement condition. That means that no building work or even demolition can take place until a written scheme of investigation has actually been submitted and approved in writing. And if you look on down through the condition, I won't read it all out now, but it's a stage. It's got several stages in it that all have to be observed. So that basically would take care of anything that would be predicted or in actual fact found at the site.
Thanks.
And obviously, if there's any trouble at that point, we could obviously consult Historic England in terms of approving those.
Okay.
The second question was to do with Thames Water. Well, to be honest, I'd suggest it was a rather strange objection, because clearly this is an existing residential building, and
Exactly.
the proposal is for the same number of flats. So I really don't know what Thames Water would imagine would be the additional pressure on sewage pumping. But that really shouldn't be the result. It's an existing residential building.
Because I don't understand what it means. Amenity will be affected. You know, what amenity and what informative are future occupiers supposed to be given? I don't understand this at all. Do you?
No, I mean, I simply don't. Informative 9 is drawing Thames Water's position to the applicant's attention. Obviously, if planning permission is granted and they're developing the site, then they clearly need to have Thames Water's agreement on a number of key matters in terms of water supply. And Thames Water, no doubt, could raise any issues they have with the applicants at that stage.
Okay. Well, without Thames Water here, I don't think we can discuss this any further.
I think, Dori,
Thank you very much.
I don't think this is something that should be central to our deliberations. I feel it's a slightly unusual point, frankly.
It is. I agree, and I think Mr. Taylor has actually put it well.
I think so. Exactly. Colleagues, any final questions? Because I think we need to move to make a decision about this. Okay, so I'll start with this. I think there are a couple of points here that I think I personally start with a principle which I know quite a lot of local residents, and actually I'm very sympathetic to this view that in a way it's a rather unsatisfactory situation in which an Edwardian mansion block, which was quite obviously originally built as 20-something apartments, spacious and smart apartments behind a fine facade, but they got split up, and unfortunately, for better or for worse, the planning system has determined that they have to be considered nowadays as being 40-something flats, and as a result, the application comes forward for, surprise, surprise, 40-something new apartments, and I think I in a way that's an unsatisfactory situation, but I fear it is simply where we are. And also, I think the fact that the previous permission, although it's from expired, I think unfortunately, if one is looking at this in a rigorous sort of planning way, unfortunately, I think that does actually have to carry quite a lot of weight, regrettably. I think otherwise, I think the contribution to affordable housing in terms of a sum of money is welcome. In reality, I think if there was a viability assessment done, what would happen is that there'd be an assessment that maybe two of the new homes would have to be affordable, and of course social landlords in reality are not interested in 1 or 2 or 3 homes. So it's a difficult situation, I'm afraid. I think in terms of construction traffic management plan, in particular businesses and colleges that are on the high street nearby, I think that's something that's going to have to be managed properly. But you know, I think you know, in the greater scheme of things, I think unfortunately, for better or for worse, it's something that we probably, personally, I think we probably all have to simply, you know, have to accept that this is unfortunately the correct way of viewing this. I don't know, colleagues, in terms of making a decision, would anyone like to make a particular comment or disagree with what I've said, or anyone particular have a view?
Go ahead. I think that's pretty fair. To me, it all comes down to the traffic management plan, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Could I think I would agree with that. The question is then, should we have the plan come back to the committee? And of course, we should make sure that I think whatever happens, I think Mr. Taylor obviously mentioned all the right things, and so did one or two of the objectors about all the work going on and future work, that we should look at the one-way system is actually put into such a plan, and the applicant has offered it. So, and then should it come back so we can examine it? Because Allen Street, I think as Councillor Wade also pointed out, is really a tricky street for parking and so on. And I mean, I know it too. We all know it, I think. It's narrow.
Yeah.
We have to look at the vehicles as well. You know, the size of the vehicles that are proposed. We don't know that yet, I don't think. So we should have it back. Whether it's us or somebody else is okay.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I think, Dory, that's a fair point. The top of Allen Street, of course, narrows slightly, and just at the moment.
That's precisely what I was thinking.
Yeah, I was going to say, Linda, you know this as well, obviously, and obviously on the high street, just at the moment, there is quite a lot of building work going on. Now, we don't know exactly, if we agree to this, when exactly the work would take place, but I think the coordination of CTMP with what's happening elsewhere in the immediate area is obviously pretty important. Okay, well, look.
Can I just say that I think CTMP has got to come back, and it's got to be really worked out. The second thing is, again, about the materials and the kind of the blankness of the back. And I really think that actually, touching on the parking permits, I really think that in an ideal world, this is a new development, and that we should actually be far stricter on the amount of car parking permits that are actually provided. It would have been nice to have seen something, for example, like electric car park, charging point, or something that would have supported less car use, not just bicycles, because it's a holistic thing. Nothing about if they have disabled people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'd have liked that to have been far more robust. So that's.
I agree.
Right.
I think in response to that, I think we probably need to go along. I would suggest we need to go along with what is proposed in the report. However, I think, Linda, you're quite right. Condition 3, submission of details, covers all of the materials, and I think that I know it seems a modest thing in the greater scheme of things, but I think that exactly what the bricks are that are used to build the new rear of the building, I think that does actually matter to the immediate neighbourhood, and I think that is actually, I think that condition is something which, okay, it's reserved to officers, but I think it is important. Okay, so I think, excuse me, I think we need to make a decision on this. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions attached, and I would also add that we wish the CTMP for this to come back to a planning applications committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would suggest that we vote on the recommendation on that basis with that amendment, that the CTMP comes back. So if I can go down the metaphorical table, Councillor Schmetling, are you in favour or against the recommendation?
I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Wade?
Yes, and can I add one point? Sorry. That if there's an educational college, that negotiations should take place, that no heavy work be done during exams.
Well, I think that's an aspect of the CTMP. You've reminded me of something I was thinking of saying, and I think that's absolutely that's a sensible. That's a
Very
good point, which I'm sure will be taken on board. Okay.
Right.
But otherwise, given that, you're in favour. Yeah.
Fine.
Councillor Butcher?
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. And I'm in favour as set out previously. So, okay, so that is granted. Now, it's 20:08. I suggest we just have a couple of minutes break before we move on to consider the next case, which is Bywater Street. Okay, so we just pause for a couple of minutes.
Well, let's make it fun. Shall we? Give us chance.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Not the literal two. Okay, thank you very much.
Tom and...
Certainly, Chairman, you're back live now.
Great. Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everyone. Okay, so if we can now move on to consider the application at 23 Bywater Street in Chelsea. Matthew, go ahead, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. So 23 Bywater Street is located to the northern end on the eastern side. The development proposes the excavation of a basement beneath the building and the front and rear gardens, and the erection of extension to the lower ground floor level with the associated alterations. So on the slide, you can see the sections, the plans that have been submitted as part of the application. On the left is the existing section looking through the building. The label, I don't know whether you can see that, is Bywater Street on the left-hand side, so that's the front of the property, and the rear is to the right. And then the so that shows the existing floor levels, and then on the right-hand side slide, you can see the proposed excavation of a basement which extends beneath the property, and it extends to the rear within the garden and to the front light well beneath the vaults to the street. And this shows the second section that's been submitted as part of the application. So this clearly shows the basement level, which would have a floor to ceiling height of 3.1 metres. The lower ground floor level, it's important to note, and I think this the plan comparison shows it quite clearly, in that the development would include an associated lowering of the lower ground floor level. So that's in addition to the excavation of the basement. And that's shown in the proposed plans to the right. And then this shows so on the left hand side we have the proposed basement floor level, and you can see the manifestation, the external manifestation of the basement would be the light well, which is located abutting the rear building line, and you can see to the front a roof light located within the floor of the existing light well to the front of the building. And then the plans on the in the middle on the right hand side show the existing situation in the lower ground floor and the proposed ground. So you can see at the top of the plan the existing light well, which extends across the majority of the to the rear, with a small extension, and the development proposes enlarging this extension at ground floor level. And then you can see the alterations within the light well, removal of the stairs, and the as I said before, the roof light at the bottom of the light well. And that just shows again the ground floor, the upper ground floor level. It shows the roof of the extension and the light work to the front of the property. And then this is a comparison. So on the left is a photo of the front elevation of the property. You can see a section which cuts through the existing light well at the top on the right hand side, and where the basement would be located on the elevation beneath that. And then again, this is one showing the rear elevation. You can see the open character of the rear garden with the modest extension, and then the proposed extension with the light well that will obviously be extended down to the proposed basement floor level. And then this shows is a view looking northwards along Bywater Street. The application property is kind of further up. You can just see it, the blue plastic towards the end on the right hand side. And then I've included a plan that has been submitted as part of the construction traffic management plan, which shows the application site, the proposed loading bay on the left hand side of the road. This will, so obviously they've submitted a CTMP alongside the application. It's proposed to suspend one parking bay opposite the site, and the soil would be manually transferred across to narrow-bodied vehicles that would wait in the loading bay. The CTMP proposes that all vehicles would enter and exit in a forward gear, and the loading bay would be available in the evening and weekends when work is not in progress. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, in that case, if I can ask Karen Irving if you're able to join us.
Hopefully that's working.
Yeah, no, I can hear you well. That's very good. So please, when you're ready, if you can go ahead, and you have up to 3 minutes to speak, please, when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Karen Irving. I'm chair of the Bywater Street Residents Association. We have no objection to building work. However, 22 out of 36 of our houses objected to this application, primarily because the applicant has not followed RBKC's protocol for basement extensions. This stipulates that there should be pre-application consultation with neighbours. In the planning statement that forms part of the application, item 615 states that a draft CTMP has been circulated to all of the neighbours in Bywater Street and that no comments were received. This is categorically untrue. No resident of Bywater Street received a draft CTMP. In the draft TMP that forms part of this application, item Q7 states that on the 18th of May 2020, the applicant wrote numbers 1 to 27, delivered by way of recorded delivery, attaching a copy of the draft TMP. This also is categorically untrue. The correspondence sent by the applicant was simply a note stating that she would be commencing building work and wished to apologise in advance for any slight disruption. Hence, the 4 responses she received did not refer to the TMP. In the structural engineer's report that forms part of this application, item number 19 states that the architect and the client can confirm consultation with the neighbours. Again, this is untrue. The draft TMP states in item Q18 that the commercial vehicles used will be 4.9 metres long tippers and a 5.4 metre long van. I can personally only find evidence of the existence of a mini tipper, which is 6.7 metres long. So it would seem to me that the TMP's measurements of vehicles is suspect. The draft TMP also refers to the requirement for lorries, etc., to enter and leave Bywater Street, which is a narrow cul-de-sac, utilising forward gear only. This would necessitate the commercial vehicles executing a 3-point turn. There is no turning circle in Bywater Street. The end of the street is 5 metres wide and a single yellow line from the culmination of residents' parking to the end is 7 metres long. As a long-term resident, I often see cars finding it impossible to effectively turn around and being forced to reverse into the King's Road. The draft TMP in item Q28 refers to the requirement for the suspension of a parking bay. Bywater Street does not have individual parking bays. The residents' parking is delineated by a single line running the length of the street. If parking space is allocated to the contractor and the lorries operate on a weight and load basis outside number 23, as per the TMP, effectively the bottom section of the street will be completely blocked for a considerable period of time each day. This would raise serious considerations in terms of road safety and access for emergency vehicles. As Bywater Street is a narrow cul-de-sac with limited turning facilities, an acceptable TMP and adequate consultation with the neighbours should be a prerequisite to planning permission even being considered. I would urge the committee to refuse the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If you stay on the line, because there may well be questions. If I can now ask Edward George and Dan Fenton, who I think are representing the applicant, if they are able to join us on the line. And in similar fashion, between the two of you, you've got up to 3 minutes, please, perhaps to address the points that have just been made.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chairman. I'll be as brief as possible. I just want to respond to most of the objections in relation to the proposed scheme, and much of that objection relates to this accusation of lack of consultation prior to the submission. And prior to the committee, I've provided evidence to the committee which were in the addendum, which demonstrate that that consultation was carried out, and we did receive correspondence which I responded to, but we didn't receive any comments in relation to the CTMP. I realised at the time it was difficult. It was during the first COVID lockdown, but it was carried out. And then since then, the council carried out their own consultation during the application. In terms of structural impact, we submitted a CMS which demonstrates that the structural stability of the neighbouring buildings will not be affected. The application has also been submitted with noise and dust and vibration report, which outlines the method for limiting the impact of development on neighbours, and in addition will be required to comply with the Code of Construction Practice as required by a recommended condition. The proposed basement is in accordance with all the relevant policies in the development plan, and appropriate information and measures have been carried out and submitted with the application, and we have the subject of conditions prior to commencing work. So we acknowledge that it's difficult in that site. The basements given consent and carried out in similarly constrained streets within the borough. I'll now pass over to Dan to deal with the CTMP concerns.
Thanks, George. Good evening. The draft plan follows the guidance set by the council and has been considered acceptable by the highways officers. It also accords with the Code of Construction Practice and follows similar methods to other applications in locations such as this. The CTMP does acknowledge the constrained nature of Bywater Street, and we've proposed measures and techniques that reflect this. There are no proposals to use large construction vehicles such as a concrete mixer or a grab lorry or a skip lorry. Instead, it's smaller transit style vehicles, and I mean there are a number of different brands of vehicles such as a Nissan Cabstar, many others as well. I think in addition to that, all the vehicle activity would be scheduled and controlled by qualified banksmen. We can even walk vehicles in from King's Road. There's only ever going to be one vehicle at the site at any time. The vehicle hours have been limited as well, so we've tried to follow all guidance. As mentioned, there are no plans to suspend lots of parking. It's only one vehicle because of the size of vehicles that we're proposing. And then again, finally, as has been discussed sort of on other applications tonight, there is an opportunity to kind of revisit the CTMP to address any further matters on this.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, do we have any questions? Councillor Wade.
I happen to know Bywater Street very well, and I would actually side on the residents. It's a really very difficult street, and I have experienced having to reverse out into the King's Road myself. So I'd like to have more detail about the size of vehicle proposed, how long you think you'd have to wait, how you're going to excavate, how long, I mean, because there's a basement actually requires a lot of soil coming out. How many movements, how long you'd have to be stationary, those type of details, because if you block there, you're actually effectively blocking about 4 or 5 houses that would not be able to get out at all.
Yeah, so just in answer to that, I mean, the loading area that we proposed is essentially at the end of the cul-de-sac where the parking bays are. The vehicles are 2 metres wide, so they're the same width as a standard parking bay. So there's no kind of blocking of access. Because of the size of vehicles, that does mean there is more vehicle movements, just purely because the loads that they can carry are much smaller. So a Nissan Cabstar, which is the kind of similar type vehicle that we propose, it can only accommodate 1 or 2 cubic meters of spoil on the back of the lorry. So over the course of 4 months, in terms of the excavation phase, you will get kind of in the order of 5 vehicles a day taking 2 cubic meters of spoil on each load. So because of the strategy that we proposed, it means more vehicle movements, but it's in a managed way and it's smaller loads. The dwell times for vehicles it's kind of 20 to 30 minutes for a Nissan Cabstar, just purely because you've got a smaller load. The actual loading it's a quicker process, and therefore the vehicle doesn't have to be there as long.
And so it's going to be, sorry, I'm going through my paperwork. I'm trying to see whether there's any detail about how you're actually physically going to get the spoil out. Is this
So again, because of the nature of the site and the way there's only parking on one side of the road, the spoil has to be pre-bagged and manually carried from the site to the vehicle. So it gets broken up within the site and dug out, and then it gets pre-bagged, and then it gets transferred across the footway, across the carriageway into the loading vehicle.
And so what protection is there for the adjacent houses from dust?
From dust, I mean, there'll be a hoarding at the front of the site. So again, we haven't proposed the hoarding across the footway. It's kind of within that front section of the site. So again, it kind of contains the dust. Any kind of material being pre-bagged would then get transferred over to the waiting vehicle.
And it would be stored on site?
Yes, it'd be stored on site, yeah. And again, I think that's because of the small loads that we're working to, kind of that's how it works.
And you have had detailed discussions with number 22 and number 24 about because these are Victorian terraces. They're not robust structures going down. Have you had detailed consultation with them?
I personally haven't, as the transport consultant. I mean, there will be party of all awards, but I think Edward might be able to answer more on that.
The only thing I can say is we did carry out, as I submitted to the committee addendum, that we sent letters to everybody in the street.
No, I asked about specifically the next door neighbours. These are Victorian houses. They're not of amazingly robust structure. You're going to be going down into a basement area it's going to be quite, shall we say, delicately intrusive to the adjacent properties. I just wondered what consultation you'd had with the next door neighbours.
As far as I have been involved, only sending the letters to the residents. I don't know if the owner has spoken directly to either side in terms of the impact on them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Schmedling.
Hi, this is Doris Schmedling. I'm very concerned about what the objector said about the draft CTMP not being delivered. It's a question to the applicant. You'd sent letters to them, but the objector didn't say you didn't send letters. What she said was, on behalf of all the residents of the street, was that you've sent a note round. Can you prove that you sent the draft CTMP around?
The letter, which should be attached to the pre-committee addendum that you received, explains what that works are being CTMP and included a link to a WeTransfer for the CTMP. And I received a number of, two residents in Bywater Street saying that the link didn't work, but then I forwarded the CTMP to them, clearly showing that we had sent a the letter, and we were getting communication about it. So, I mean, that's as far as I know. From my point of view, when we sent it, the link to the CTMP did work. But
sorry, what did you say? Did you say WeLink? I didn't understand that.
A WeTransfer link. So it's like to a kind of website where you can download it.
I see. Thank you. My question is, may I ask a question now of the objector?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Did you, besides the note, perhaps you could elaborate on what you did and didn't receive, and having heard now what the applicant has said?
Certainly, thank you. I live at number 25. I haven't received a letter from Mr. George at all, I'm afraid. Certainly nothing with a link to the CTMP. Before making my notes and before I was actually asked by the street to speak this evening on their behalf, I checked with every single one from number 1 to number 27, including my own house, obviously, number 25. Not a single person that I could find had a copy of the CTMP. None of them had had a copy at all of the traffic management plan. They had all received. It wasn't quite a handwritten note, but it looked like a handwritten note from the applicant, Miss Chow herself. They had all received that, and that's what came by recorded delivery back in May 2020. But none of my residents were familiar with the CTMP. It may well be that you then gave 2 people out of 36 houses a link that they were able to use. We certainly didn't get it. And as far as the other councillors' questions about number 22 and 24, there's been no discussion or consultation with either 22 or 24 by either the applicant or by the people who are representing her.
Thank you. Chair, I have a question, actually, sort of a procedural question to you about this. We've got here two completely different sets of view of what actually happened, and it seems to be unresolved. You know, the applicant says they sent round the CTMP to, well, I don't know, everybody, and the objector says no. So what do you suggest one should do about that?
Well, I think what I would suggest, Tori, is that why don't we put that question to officers afterwards, because I think, you know, we aren't a court. We're not here to decide if anybody is sort of telling the truth or not. You know, we're here to make a decision about a planning application. So you know, it's a slightly different case. I have to just quickly, as an aside, I would say that quite a lot of these matters in relation to number 22 and number 24, that they would be covered by party wall agreements, which I think the applicant would so far as I can make out, would be bound to have, but they aren't part of the planning system. So we've got to be very careful here not to get involved in things which really the planning system is just not, it's just not our business. Councillor Woodger, Maxwell, did you have a question?
My question was about consultation, but the other councillors have asked it. I have a question for the officers, but I'll wait for that.
Okay, all right. Dory, have you any other questions that you'd like to put to either the objector, lady who's the objector, or the people who are representing the applicant?
No, thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for coming along to join us. So we now move on to members of the committee asking any questions that we have to officers. So perhaps if can I pick up this point that Dory made, and also I think Councillor Woodger too. Matthew, would you like to respond to some of these points that have been made?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you, Chair. I think we need to take almost a step back and look at when we receive planning applications of any type. There's a number of stages that we we, as a council, will consult neighbouring properties, but also we require applicants to do the same, and especially when construction traffic management plan and basements are being proposed, because of the extent of proposals and the impact that they can have. Now, looking at the information in front of us, as the applicant has made aware, the applicant provided some evidence yesterday in response to the objections, and so just going through it, you would have all seen that in the addendum report, but in that there are copies of receipts. I'm just getting it up. Yeah, so there's copies of receipts from the post office, which refer to building numbers and letters sent out. Going through the correspondence that has also been sent in, there's correspondence from number 22 Bywater Street, which so there's correspondence from 22 Bywater Street. There's also correspondence from number 3 Bywater Street, which refers to the CTMP. I would also stress that as part of the planning application, the council itself has carried out its statutory duty. So we have directly written to number 22 and 24 Bywater Street. A notice has been erected outside of the application site, bringing other people's attention to the site and giving them the opportunity to comment. And obviously we have received a number of objections to the application, which suggests that people have had that opportunity to comment on the proposals.
Okay.
As part of the conditions that are recommended, it's also a requirement to submit a final CTMP. When we assess the final CTMP that has been submitted, we would expect to see the question relating to consultation to be updated in respect of any further consultation that has been received prior to them submitting that final CTMP for the discharge of condition.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. Maxwell, did you have a question?
Yes, my question, I think when I was looking for the objections, they mentioned about concerns about the subdivision, a potential subdivision of the basement. Would that require a separate planning permission and like a new application, or?
Internal alterations, so for instance, the use of the room wouldn't require permission. I mean, looking at the development and proposals, the key thing to look at is the depth. Now, as I stated in my presentation, the proposed floor to ceiling height of the basement is 3.1 metres, and there's associated lowering of the lower ground floor level, which results in 4.5 metres of excavation. Now, in my opinion, it would require further excavation to be able to introduce an additional floor level, given the build-up because of the floors themselves and any service runs and anything like that. Yeah, I mean, the depth of the basement is within the requirements, basically, of policy CL7, which obviously restricts the depth of basements.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that. So I think actually a last question, just to be quite clear, Mr. Woodhead, just to make certain we're on the right lines here. Obviously, we as a council, we strongly encourage everyone to consult widely about building work and CTMPs in particular. But I think I'm right in saying, from a statutory point of view, we aren't able to enforce that. There isn't an obligation on an applicant to consult people. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Yes, that is right. Although within the CTMP and within the submitted material, we would expect them to respond and demonstrate a level of neighbourhood engagement. You're right in saying we can't force them to go around and write to every single property within a street or within an area of an application site. But certainly it's something which we do look at when, for instance, the CTMP is submitted, and like has been raised, there is a question specifically relating to consultation with neighbouring properties within the CTMP template, which the applicant has filled out.
And just following on from that, when an applicant comes in to discharge the CTMP condition, okay, those documents, they get put up on our website, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. So we will, once the application is registered and made valid, we'll publish it for any residents to be able to comment on that application for the 21-day period, basically.
Okay. So in other words, although it's not a statutory requirement, but in practical terms, you know, any sort of sensible applicant definitely is going to tell their neighbours what they're proposing to do in order to satisfy the CTMP condition.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if permission was to be granted, they would have 3 years to implement that. Yeah. Now things can change by the time that a condition is to be discharged, and so we would expect to see an update of any continuous neighbour engagement from the date of if the application was given permission to the submission of a final CTMP.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Linda, do you have just a final quick question?
Yes, just very quickly. Do we know how many basements have been done in Bywater Street?
I don't know that off the top of my head, unfortunately.
All right, thank you.
I mean, if it helps, the application, the supporting material of the applicant stated that there wasn't any within the immediate vicinity, but I don't know how many have been built in Bywater Street itself.
Okay, all right. And Dorry, do you have a final question?
Yes, for the officers. Given the difficulty of working in the street and the sensitivity of the construction, I would like to suggest that the construction management plan comes back to the committee. It's really tricky in there, and I think we should all, well, whoever's us or colleagues should have a look at it and give the residents a chance to look at it as well.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I think we need to thanks, Dorry. I think we need to move to a decision. I think Councillor Schmettling's proposal that CTMP come back to committee. I think on balance, I think I probably don't agree with that, but I'd be interested to know what colleagues thought. I don't know, Councillor Wade, would you be minded to go that way?
I'm just very unhappy about the whole application. I think the just doing the works and the traffic in it's very much like Charles Street, which I think you sat on.
Oh yes, yes,
the committee. It has everything about it, and except for the fact that if you have to reverse a vehicle out of this, you're going into the King's Road, which has only got effectively one lane, rather than.
No, I understand that.
So I have enormous reservations.
Okay, all right. That's helpful. Thank you. Councillor Woodger, how do you feel about this?
It's not obviously great, but I think in terms of in terms of as the application stands, I don't think we should kick this can down the road and push the CT off to another committee. I think we're here to consider what's in front of us, and I think it's acceptable.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, in that case, I think I'm hearing that probably on balance we feel that we're happy to simply go to consider a decision on the application in front of us with the recommendation to grant with the conditions attached, and by that the CTMP, obviously it has to come to offices, but it wouldn't have to come to councillors. It wouldn't have to come back to committee. I think I'm hearing that probably is where we're going. Okay, so let me take
Councillor Wade, do you think that would be okay? Well, Councillor Woodger, you didn't say that. Are you happy with not to have it come back to committee? Sorry, Chair.
I think officers can decide this. Yeah.
Pardon?
I think officers can decide the CTMP.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, in that case, I think okay, it's that there can sensibly be different opinions about something like this, but I think I see where we're going. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions attached, obviously including CTMP condition. So if I can go down the table and ask people if they're in favour of the recommendation or not. Councillor Schmetling.
Well, I hate to do this, but I think I'm going to abstain. Normally I prefer not to abstain on anything, but okay. I'm not against it, but I'm not for it without it coming back to committee, so I'll abstain.
Okay. No, that's I completely understand. That's understood. Councillor Wade.
I'm against it.
Okay. Councillor Woodger.
Yeah, I'm for it. I'm favour, Chair.
Okay, and I'm in favour as well with the conditions required. So that is actually that is granted with the conditions attached. So the CTMP will have to come back into offices for their consideration, and obviously that will be then examined on that basis. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you very much. So if we can now move on to the next application, which is relating to 1 Palace Green. And I think, Mr. Taylor, that's back to you, isn't it?
Sorry, Chairman, I was on mute. Right, yeah. So yes, this application relates to number 1 Palace Green. There are actually 2 applications before you this evening, one of them for planning permission and one of them for listed building consent. I'll take you through some slides now to illustrate the discussion in the report. So the building is a grade 2 star listed building at the southern end of Palace Green. And just to give you an image for your consideration, you see there on the left the very sort of dominant and attractive front elevation and the north side elevation. And that's just a blow up of the entrance leading into the building. So it's a very striking building at the southern end of Palace Green. And just some internal shots and a shot at the rear just to give yourself a flavour of the interior. And then that plan, I think, is quite useful in showing the different sort of histories of different parts of the building. So if you look at it closely, you can see that the sort of orangey brown main structure of the building, that's the 1868 structure, which obviously is the main part of the listed building and the main part of its historic interest. And then towards the left of that image, you can see in blue, that's the coach house, which was actually built in fact, the structure that's there now was built in the 90s. And clearly that's not part of the original structure, but nevertheless covered by the listing. And then that's the ground floor demolition plan. As usual with demolition plans, you've got the areas of demolition identified in red. And then in the top left-hand corner of the image, you'll see that that's the coach house, which is to be demolished and rebuilt. There is also red, obviously, a few bits of red internally, and then some red at the bottom of the image. The demolition at the bottom of the image is a 1950s addition to the building, and those parts in red that are being removed internally are not of significant historic interest. And then that's the proposed ground floor plan with the new walls identified in black. So, I mean, as you'd expect, that tallies quite closely with the demolition plan. So you can see there what is proposed to be put back in terms of walls. And then that's the first floor demolition plan. Again, it pretty much mirrors what's happening beneath it at ground floor level. And the rear and side demolition plan. So you're looking there at the back of the building, so that's the opposite side to Palace Green. You'll see that there's quite a nasty sort of fire escape staircase to the right-hand side of the image, which is to be removed. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the existing coach house, which is to be removed. The blue rectangle at the lower part of the slide, that shows the extent of the proposed basement level, which would be slotted in underneath the rebuilt coach house. So that's not under the sort of main structure of the historic building, but under the 1990s coach house. And then that's another image to show the rebuilt coach house with the basement level beneath that. And that's the existing front elevation. And you can see there the existing coach house to the right-hand side of the image. And then that's the proposed coach house. So I'll go back, that's the existing, and that's the proposed. And then that's the photograph of the existing north elevation. And that's the existing 1990s coach house that you see there at the right-hand side of the image. And from in the lower left image there, you can see roughly what you would see if you're standing in Palace Green. And then on the right-hand side is the full image of the property, with obviously the main historic building on the left, and then the proposed coach house to its right. And that's a close-up image of the proposed coach house. And that's the last slide, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Nobody's registered to speak about this, so we can move straight to questions to Mr. Taylor about this. Who'd like to go first? Who fancies going first? Councillor Wade.
I mean, this is a unique building. I mean, Philip Webb didn't produce that many buildings, and I feel that we have to be very careful about this. I think the extension proposed, you know, they talk about it being subservient. I just think that I don't think it's a very good design. I couldn't work out whether there was any light from the drawings going into the basement. It is a significant building. It is a significant location, and I just thought these are just very large apartments, and I just wondered what respect there was for the actual interior, because there are still some elements of the Webb Morris interior in there, and I just felt they could have done better. What does Mr. Taylor feel? Have you got your conservation hat on?
Well, through you, Chairman, yes, I certainly have my conservation hat on for this one. I mean, clearly that this is a lovely building and a very important building in historic terms and in terms of Palace Green. There's been our conservation officers, you would not be surprised to hear, have been very exhaustive in terms of their discussions with the applicants over a long period of time. There were first discussions here several years ago, and there's been a long history of discussion over that time, in which time the internal proposals as well as the external proposals have been constantly sort of fine-tuned. And the conservation team are now satisfied that actually everything of importance and historic interest internally is being retained. So it's not a balance internally where they're removing some things of interest but keeping others.
Because it's just interesting because you've got
supported by the conservation team now.
Because if the emphasis, because I read this report with some interest. It was from the applicant, a lot of detail, which was very interesting. For example, this is a building that seems to have suffered from a lot of planning applications and a lot of adaptations. And I think the original design had a picket fence. It didn't have that Victorian festoon blind construction at the front. So there's some things where they're going back to trying to emphasize they're going back to the original ideals of the principles of the building, but they're actually and others they're not. And I think that the coach house extension is a classic example of a nothing building that neither contributes to the original building or to its own.
Well, through you, Chairman, I think that sort of description of the existing coach house obviously has been the starting point for the whole approach taken to the side. I think there have been discussions in the past about alternatives. So if we take the starting point as being the 1990s coach house, clearly the existing coach house is not of historic interest in itself. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it does sit there quite quietly. It doesn't challenge the superiority of the main elevation there on the north side. Now, as it's not of historic interest, the question would be, well, if there's no objection to its demolition per se, but what would the preferred approach be to a new building there? And then if you think of the options, just to take it to extremes, one option would be to put an unashamedly very modern design, a striking modern design that would clearly be very distinct from the main building. But the problem with that is it might also start to challenge the main building. It may, an eye-catching design would probably start to compete and to challenge. So at the other end of the scale, you could have effectively a complete copy. Of the existing building. You could pick up on its architectural features and bring those across into a new building. That would probably be criticised as a pastiche. It would be dishonest. It might sit there quite happily, but obviously it wouldn't be what it was purporting to be. And then the middle ground is something of this ilk. So that this is a design which, in terms of its materials, would be compatible with the main building, but without challenging it.
It's taller, isn't it?
It's a little taller.
So it conflicts with
the stone band on the left-hand side of the main building. In fact, actually, the existing coach house does reach as high as the stone band as well. So actually, I think it's just that montage that makes it look taller. In fact, it isn't. All right, it is very slightly. If you look at that, it does rise just above the stone band, but not a significant difference. But I think in terms of its design, it's been very deliberately designed as something that doesn't challenge the sort of primacy of the main elevation beside it. So it's just intended to sit there quietly. It's not meant to be an eye catcher.
I think Linda, I think we should let's see what other colleagues think about this.
All right.
I think we've had a good go at that with. I don't know, Dorrie or Maxwell. What do you make of this? Have you any questions to Mr. Taylor about this?
Can I speak?
Yeah, Maxwell, you go ahead.
I'm just disappointed Councillor Friedman, who called this in, isn't here to speak. I think, to be honest, this just comes down to design. I don't know, in planning terms, can you turn something down if you don't like its design? Is that substantial reason enough? I don't know.
Actually, Maxwell, I think actually that's a very good question, and I think we should put that to Mr. Taylor actually and ask him to respond to that now. Actually, yeah.
Well, Chairman, to answer that question, very simply, our subjective views as to what we like and what we don't like are simply not material, and we have to cast those aside. And the planning decision has to be an objective one, which basically is set within the context for the development that's being considered. So we have to try and put our personal, whether we like something, to one side, and look at how the building fits in with its surroundings, how visible it would be from Palace Green itself, and what its impact might be, both in historic terms, in terms of the historic interest and integrity of the parent building, and then on the general appearance of the property and the area. But our personal likes and dislikes should definitely be put to one side.
Okay.
All right.
Chair, I've
sorry
asked about this. I mean, the Kensington Society has piled in with objections, some extensive objections, and so has an unknown local resident. Don't know where that person, I don't need the name, but I wonder where that person lives. But the point made in the I don't know about the Kensington Society one, but certainly the other person speaks about the fact that there's insufficient units in there, and that should be a planning consideration. And I mean, what's your view? Because I mean, the Kensington Society objections, I think, on the basis of planning, other planning issues, are addressed in the summary in that table that's always produced. But what's your view of the number of units that could have been in there? Was that purely a commercial decision?
Very simply, that's not part of the proposal. That they're not proposing new units within the building. There's no material change of use proposed, so it simply isn't part of the proposals, but before the planning authority. In any event, clearly the interior, as we've already discussed, has been altered. I think the nature of the building as a 2-star listed building would anyway be a huge limitation on what you could do internally in terms of units.
Understood.
But in any event, it's not part of the proposals to change the number of units.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Well, I think we have to make a decision on this. I have to say I'm rather in two minds. When it comes to design and those sort of matters, for example, like the setting of a listed building, which obviously is relevant to the proposed new extension here. I'm always inclined to set the bar really quite high in terms of the bar is high in terms of most things probably have to be considered acceptable. So the test is quite high to say that they are unacceptable. Okay. However, in this particular case, I'm sort of sympathetic to the arguments that perhaps something a little bit better might be put in. I think in terms of the parts of the application relating to the internal alterations of the listed building, I think, to my mind, these things are, I think, must be considered acceptable. I mean, the idea that even a listed building, and a very grand listed building, it has to be adapted over time in a way to fit the needs of the people owning it and using it, and I think that's sensible. So I think, to my mind, we are only really concerned about what this proposed extension looks like. But I'm very happy to go with what colleagues, what we think, and we will see where we go. So the recommendation, first of all, because there are two here. First of all, the recommendation on the planning permission. So the recommendation is to grant, obviously with the conditions attached. If I can go down the table and ask people what they think. So, Councillor Schmetling, are you in favour or against the recommendation?
I'm in favour.
Okay. Councillor Wade?
I agree with you that I think that the internals are okay, but I have grave reservations about the standard of the coach house. I think it compromises the historic setting.
Okay, so you are against the recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, all right. Councillor Woodger?
In favour, sir.
Okay, you're in favour. Oh gosh, puts me on the spot. I think on balance, I'm actually against the recommendation. I'm not. It's hard. It's a difficult decision. I think on balance, perhaps the extension should be something that is perhaps more subservient to the listed building. I think it's very marginal, and I make no apologies for saying that I'm in kind of two minds about it. But I think on balance, I feel that way. So on that basis, the planning permission is and now it's 2-2, and I should say, so as chairman, I'm using my casting vote to say I'm voting against the recommendation as a casting vote. So it is the recommendation is lost. Mr. Taylor, can you help me here on this? I think that I think my objection really is that the design of the proposed extension is not in keeping with the listed building, and that would be the basis on which I think it's unacceptable. Is that a reasonable reason for refusal?
Well, Chairman, with all due respect, I think I'd have to advise that the phrase "not in keeping," it just wouldn't be clear enough for a reason.
All right. No,
it's something that obviously one can feel that something's not in keeping, but I think we'd have to turn that into more planning speak or historic building speak.
Well, could we say compromises?
Well, the key to it. Sorry, if I could just finish. I think that the key to it. I think maybe you said the word yourself, which is subservience.
Yes.
So just to articulate what I think you were thinking at that point, I think you're feeling that the architecture of the coach house is not sufficiently subservient to the parent building. Would that be correct?
Yes, I think that's correct. I think the existing building, which is quite a modest structure, set back, and frankly, you probably wouldn't really notice it if you were walking along Palace Green. But whereas I think what is this proposal is something which is kind of much more prominent. So no, I would be happy to go along with your suggested wording, Mr. Taylor. Councillor Wade, sorry,
it was all right, but I do think that one, it's a unique building. The Philip Webb is a unique building, but it's also the importance of the actual location. So there are two elements to it, isn't it? And I think that the wording, it's not sufficiently subservient to its historic and architectural location.
Okay.
Certainly, that does it, isn't it?
Mr. Taylor, is that's reasonable, yeah?
But
I mean,
perhaps setting rather than location.
All right. No,
yeah,
setting is more contextual, I think.
All right. There are only 3 Philip Webb houses, and this is quite unique in his style. There's the one in Glebe Place, isn't there? And there's one in Holland Village, but this is a unique building for his style. So unashamedly, I would say that was architecturally important.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, in that case, I think procedurally, I think the correct way to do this is that I should propose now that we adopt a resolution that refuses planning permission because of the reasons that we've just discussed. So I'm going to propose that. Can I ask Councillor Wade, can I ask you to second it? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Now, so I then need to go down the line and ask if you are in favour or against this reason for refusal that just proposed and seconded. Councillor Schmetling.
Well, that's an interesting question because I was in favour of it, so okay. I suppose I have to abstain at least.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Wade.
I'm in favour of the proposal.
Yeah. Councillor Woodger.
Against.
You're against. Okay. And okay. And I vote in favour of the resolution I have just proposed. So that is carried. Now we also have, of course, the listed building consent. Now, Mr. Taylor, I would suggest we're going to have the formal vote on this first, but I would suggest the reasons might be exactly the same, essentially, yeah?
Yes, Chairman, I think the reason would be exactly the same, yeah.
Okay, so, all right. So, colleagues, what we need to do first, formally, we need to vote whether we are in favour or against the recommendation to grant listed building consent on the application that was in front of us. So, Councillor Schmetling.
Well, to be consistent, I would be in favour.
Yes, no, that's fine. Councillor Wade?
Against.
Against. Councillor Woodger?
In favour.
Okay, and on balance, I'm against, actually. So, and then so we then need to have the resolution, which I wish to propose. Linda, would you like to second?
Yes, sir.
That we refuse listed building consent on the basis of the grounds that we have just discussed, Mr. Taylor set out. So we have to do the same thing again, obviously formally to be correct. So those in favour of this resolution. So Councillor Schmetling?
I'll abstain.
Yes. Okay. No, understood. Thank you. Councillor Wade?
For.
Councillor Woodger?
Against.
Okay. And I am in favour. So that is carried. Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. That's good. So I think we can now move on to the next application, which is Kensington Park Gardens. And I think that's, Derek, that's you again, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Chairman. Thank you. This is an application for planning permission to carry out some alterations to the rear lower ground floor and the garden, and in particular erect a shed in the garden to contain some air conditioning units, 4 of them to be precise. And that's a photograph of the existing garden, and you can see there in the right-hand corner there's an existing shed, and that's where the proposed shed would be positioned. And that's a plan of the existing garden. So you see the house there in the dark shading, and at the left-hand side, that's actually the boundary between the property and Ladbroke Square garden. The garden itself is a Grade 2 listed garden, but the house that's the subject of the application is not listed. And you can see in the top left corner of the garden there, you can see the existing shed, sort of effectively backing onto Ladbroke Square garden. And then that's the proposed shed. So there's the existing again, and there's the proposed. And then in section, that's the shed there sitting at the back of the garden, adjacent to Ladbroke Square garden. And then that's a view taken from the gardens looking back towards the property. And you can see there that there's a hedge running along the property boundary with a tree behind. And you can just see the timber roof of the shed to the left-hand side of that image. That was the last slide, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, in that case, if I can ask Sophia Lambert and Walters to join us, if you're on the line.
Yes, I've unmuted myself. We've agreed we'll share it 1.5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Walters.
Okay.
And I should just specify that I am speaking also on behalf of the Ladbroke Square Garden Committee, who are unable to field anybody to come.
Okay. No, that. Thank you for that. Okay. So
it'd be great if you act as our timekeeper.
Yeah, no, I will indeed. Okay. All right. When you're ready, please go ahead. Thank you.
My name's Rupert Walters.
Hello.
There. Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah. No, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. It's the first time I've spoken.
That's right. Yeah.
I live next door to number 6. I live at number 5, and maybe what I'm going to say isn't going to be full of sort of planning speak, but it's just kind of how I feel about it. I've had since March, we've had building work next door to us, and from number 6 during lockdown, drilling in the wall continually. And one of the places that I found succor or salvation is sitting out in the garden on a bench not far away from where this air conditioning unit is proposed. And although I fully accept the engineers' reports about decibel levels, etc., I have a cautionary tale about air conditioning to tell. I was in the south of France in Saint-Paul-de-Vence over the summer, and my friend who owned the house there said that all air conditioning units had been banned in that part of Nice, because although one is individually quite quiet and doesn't let off that much pollution, a whole series of them do. And what concerns me about this proposal is that if it's accepted, if it's approved of, then other people are going to want them, and the precedent will be set. And although one unit may not make very much noise and let out very much pollution, a whole series of them certainly will. And that's my basic point.
Okay, thank you very much. Sophia.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd be grateful if the committee could have a look at the Ladbroke Association's supplementary comment, which should be in the addendum, because that's what I'll be speaking to, and it's probably easier if you have it in front of you. I should start by saying that we really just want to make 2 points. The first is the importance of these gardens and the private gardens next to them. It's really the jewel in our crown. The 16 communal gardens on the Ladbroke estate There's nothing like it anywhere else. The private gardens are very much part of them. They were designed so that they would come together as a sort of Arcadian whole. So that anything that happens in the private gardens does affect the communal garden and its character. Now, as far as I'm aware, there never has there been given any planning permission for a permanent structure in any of the gardens, private gardens adjoining a communal garden. So this would be a first. Lots of people put up these temporary sheds, like the one that exists in that garden, the sort of thing that that has no foundations that can easily be removed. But this is not one such, it really would mar. It would create a most unfortunate precedent, as well as marring this particular garden. And that is what we are really concerned about. Air conditioning is a luxury, and we don't think that luxuries should trump the harm to the conservation area in this sort of instance. I won't say more because I think it's all in what you should have in front of you, except to say that I would be grateful for an answer from the applicant to the question posed at the end about whether they can service it without having access to both sides of the shed.
Okay. Well, I think, sorry, I think time is up, but I think one of my colleagues might well pose that question. So thank you very much indeed. So can I now ask the applicant and their advisors, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for waiting. Obviously, it's been quite a long meeting. If you're on the line, if you could perhaps come up, and if you were able to introduce yourselves, and then you also have up to 3 minutes to make your case as well.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Ebru. I'm the applicant. I have my consultant, Anthony Frendo, who's the Southwest Planning Consultant, and my architect from Roddick Davidson Architect. My family have owned a property for over 45 years, and it is the house I grew up in. We are moving back into the family home, and the current application forms part of our wider refurbishment of this wonderful property. The house had become outdated and was in desperate need of restoration. The current application seeks to place air conditioning units and an acoustic enclosure within a new shed, provide an enhanced landscaping scheme for the rear garden, and a small extension to an existing lower ground plant room. One of the main objectives of this application is to improve the appearance of the garden and declutter it. It currently contains untidy outbuildings and unsightly exposed AC units and mechanical plant. The proposed development will conceal all AC units and plant within a neat timber shed. As a result of this, the overall appearance of the garden will be vastly improved and more usable, and there will be no noise disturbance from the plant. It is important to stress that from the outset, we appointed an experienced design team, including architects, an air conditioning engineer, acoustician, planning, heritage, and tree consultants. The design team tested various options for the relocation of the AC units to find a creative solution that meets all technical and planning requirements while having a minimal impact on the existing setting, which we cherish and enjoy. It was agreed between these different disciplines that the sitting of the AC units in the new shed was the most sympathetic and neighbourly option, and the council agreed prior to submission that this was an acceptable solution. This is because the units and the acoustic enclosure won't be seen or heard, and the proposed replacement shed will preserve the appearance of our garden and the residential character of the surrounding area. It was important for us that the new shed doesn't consume a lot of garden and isn't visually prominent. The hedgerow screen and surrounding trees mean there will only ever be glimpsed views of the new shed from neighbouring private gardens and from within Labrick Square Garden, much like existing sheds at other properties. The open and verdant character of the communal garden will therefore be preserved, which is very important to us. The submitted tree report also confirms that no trees will be adversely impacted by the development, and the council's tree officer agrees with this. I would also like to clarify that the only items to be stored within the new shed are 4 AC units within an acoustic enclosure, as shown on the submitted drawings. There is no boiler flue. A boiler is already installed within the house, which doesn't require planning permission. The extract flue for the boiler is at roof level, which has already been granted planning permission under a separate application. This replaced the flue that was previously at garden level. We are now also seeking to remove external AC units in the garden and place them within an acoustic enclosure, storing them in a shed where they cannot be seen or heard. Our brief for the design team was to find a solution that is both neighborly and sensitive to the historic environment our house is in. I hope members will agree that this has been achieved in this application and choose to support the planning department's recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you very much for listening, and I have my architect.
Thank you very much indeed, and your architect and other advisors, if members have questions, then obviously they are registered to speak and can assist you in answering questions. Colleagues, questions about this? Who'd like to go first? Councillor Wade.
Yes, I looked at the drawings, and I believe there's a gas boiler in there as well, isn't there?
No, the gas boiler is not within the shed. It's only containing the air conditioning units.
All right. So why would the reference where did the reference to the gas boiler come in then?
I think it was erroneously included in a acoustic report, and it had subsequently been removed, and a revised report was submitted as part of the application.
When you have louvered sides to permit ventilation, that also permits sound to come out, doesn't it?
It does, because within the shed skin, let's say, within that there is an acoustic attenuation. So effectively the sound is dampened within the shed. So what comes out of the shed is therefore within the sound recommendation and the kind of policy constraints here. So the answer to that is that there won't be sound which is above the recommended levels.
And what about, there was no way that you could keep the height of the shed because, as was mentioned by Miss Lambert, the Ladbroke Square garden is a unique set of gardens. They're very important. And so the visual amenity to people within the gardens and also the design integrity, was there no way that they could have been lower?
Due to the size of the units and the size of the acoustic enclosure that contains them, no, the shed couldn't get any shorter. We did explore the option of having 2 sheds, but felt on balance that the single shed option in the position of the existing shed, oriented to face towards the building, so it visually takes up less space, was a preferable option.
And the direction of the air is going towards the house, is it? Or is it going towards the sides?
There was a great care in actually addressing this particular issue, because what we wanted to make absolutely sure that there is no impact to the amenity, to the neighbours and to the garden. And our applicant, having lived there for a long time, is very protective of these aspects. So what happens is that because of the directionality of the airflow is actually dispersed within the shed, through the attenuation element, and then furthermore through the facade itself. So by the time it actually reaches out, it does not have a direction. And because of the location of the hedges, there won't be any air movement outside the site, and that was absolutely critical to address. And just to answer your previous question, we looked very carefully. It took quite a long time, actually, to try and create something which has a domestic feel, and it improves the setting of the garden. So the accumulative volume and bulk of all the outbuildings and so on are far less actually than what's there, and that is what led us to make that proposal, which we have also worked with the council to make sure that it does sort of address any design issues from their side.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? No. Okay, in that case, well, thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, any questions to officers about this? What do we? Any points that we'd like to raise? No. Okay. In that case,
could I just make one point, and that is there seems to be a slight discrepancy between saying it won't be heard and it'll be within acceptable levels of sound. I think those are two different things. It will be heard. It won't be entirely silent. It's an air conditioning unit.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't. Who exactly is speaking?
It's Rupert Walters. I was one of the objectors. I'm just coming back on a couple of things that were said.
I'm afraid, no, Mr. Walters, I'm afraid you can only speak if somebody who's a councillor has asked you a question.
I see. Okay.
Sorry, I apologise.
That's my mistake.
No, I understand what you're saying. Sorry, but no, you can't. No, only councillors are able to ask questions.
Okay, I understand.
It's okay. Thank you. Okay, so colleagues, questions we have to officers. Can I actually, maybe I can just ask Mr. Taylor about this. I mean, the conditions relating to air conditioning units, I mean, they're well established, but also, I mean, this kind of shared structure that's proposed, I mean, can I ask, I mean, that looks quite close to something that could really just be put up anyway without requiring planning permission. Can you help about that?
Well, yes, Chairman. I think two things there. Firstly, just picking up on the conditions, in particular, maybe the point or the concern just being raised by the neighbour. The standard condition that's, I mean, the word standard makes it sound like a very simple thing, but it's actually quite a complicated condition that is the result of years of experience in buildings and gardens in the borough by our environmental health officers. And the wording of the condition is not just to do with the noise that may be heard within a house. If you look at the sort of sixth line of the condition, it actually talks about measuring noise as well, 1.2 metres above any adjacent residential garden or terrace or patio. And the reason it has those words is that it's completely acknowledged that sitting in one's garden is part of the enjoyment of a property. And clearly there shouldn't be any disturbance or noise that sort of forces someone not to be able to sit in their garden and enjoy it. So if noise could be heard and measured within the neighbouring garden, then it may fail that part of the condition. So, it's just important for the neighbour to bear in mind that it's the garden as well as the interior of the property that would be or could be measured in terms of compliance with that condition. In terms of the shed itself, yes, I mean the shed is actually less than 3 metres. So in many situations, a garden shed or building of that size would be permitted development. But obviously that's not relevant in this case because permission sought for it. But there would be other situations where a building of that scale could be permitted development and not require planning permission.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. Colleagues, any further questions for officers on this? No. Okay, all right. Well, thank you. In that case, I think we can make a decision. The recommendation is to grant, obviously with the the conditions set out in the report, in particular in relation to air conditioning units and noise. So I can go down the table and ask people, are you in favour of the recommendation or not? Councillor Schmetling.
I've dropped out of this one, Chair.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Councillor Wade.
Approve.
In favour. Okay. Councillor Woodger.
In favour, Chair.
Okay, and I'm in favour as well. Okay, so that is granted with the conditions attached. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, so if we can now move on, please, to consider.
Yeah, point of order. Will it be noted that I did not participate in this particular case?
Yes. No, that will be noted. As you said earlier in the agenda when you pointed out that you weren't taking part in that. No, that's good.
Yes, thank you very much.
That's good. Okay, so if we can now move on to 29 Sydney Street, and that's back to South and Matthew Woodhead. Matthew.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Let me just take control.
Yeah.
Get the application. So in tonight, there are two applications, one for planning permission and another for listed building consent. It's sought for the erection of an additional storey to the rear and the refurbishment of works to the garage roof in renovation. So on the slide at the moment, you'll be able to see the rear elevation. On the left-hand side, it's the existing situation. So the property benefits from a closet wing, which terminates at first floor level, and the development would or proposes to extend the closet wing and introduce an additional storey, which you can see on the right hand side of the slide. The additional storey will be built in matching brickwork, and you can see the fenestration on the elevation there. The second element of the proposals is the alterations to the existing garage roof and the terrace. So again, on the existing elevation, you can see the property currently benefits from a terrace on top of the garage. The development would propose to alter the height of the garage, and it's actually proposed to increase the height of it by 3 brick courses, bringing the height of the garage in line with the parapet of the neighbouring properties. So moving forward here, you can see the development in section through the existing on the left hand side with the existing height of the closet wing, and then the proposed on the right hand side in the situation. On that plan, it's indicated that the kind of red line where the existing closet wing extends to. It's probably something I should have pointed out previously, but you can actually see the closet wing of neighbouring properties on the edge of the drawing, and it's a feature throughout the terrace where there's kind of varying heights of closet wings to the rear. And then again, another section through the building just demonstrating the height of the closet wing in existing and proposed situations, and the terrace. And here is just the development in floor plan with the terrace on top of the garage. And again, just the internal floor plan showing the extent of the closet wing extension. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I could ask the objector to, I hope you're with us. Yeah.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone.
Hi. Good evening. Hi. And thank you very much indeed for waiting. I know it's been quite a long evening, so thank you for bearing with this. But when you're ready, please go ahead, and you've got up to 3 minutes to make your representation. Please go ahead.
Certainly. My name is Vasco Moreno. I live on 31 Sydney Street. And I am objecting the raising of the garage roof by the 3 brick horses. The application states that this is to match the neighboring property, presumably my property, which is not right. The garage wall of number 31 has a small brick parapet, which makes it look higher on the rear street elevation documents. But in reality, the garage roofs of the 2 properties are of similar heights, and so are the patio floors. I suppose the real problem here is I wouldn't want the patio floor height of number 29 to be whatever it is, 25 centimeters higher, for them to be sort of looking down on our own patio. So that's the main thing. And then the second thing is, just keep in mind, they've been working on this property since June. They had the original consent granted in May, and they've had another, whatever it is, 4 proposals since then, including one just on the 24th of November. There should be some sort of statute of limitations for these works. It's particularly bothersome with lockdown at the moment. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that, and that's understood. I think we'll probably pursue some of these points actually. Colleagues, are there any questions that you would like to put to Mr. Moreno now? No? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. That's great. So, colleagues, if we can now talk to officers about this, can I ask, Mr. Woodhead, can I just ask, how do you address this point about the discrepancy in the levels of the buildings and that kind of thing that was just raised? What do we say about that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of in terms of the rear elevation, there's obviously a prevailing. There's a difference in terms of the height as you view. If you look through your application packs, there's actually some useful drawings after the plans, and they show the rear extensions that front onto Stewart's Grove, which is at the rear of the application property and the terrace. And you can see there's quite a variety in terms of the massing of the extensions. And there's one close-up of the application property with the raised parapet of number 31, which shows that the parapet is higher. So in visual terms, as you walk on Stewart's Grove, then actually the appearance of that would sit harmoniously within the terrace, within the wider group of properties. In relation to any living conditions concerns, obviously the roof of the terrace has an existing terrace with views that are provided from that. It's also proposed to enclose the terrace in a timber privacy screen, which and further details of which are secured by condition 3. So yeah, given the existing views that are provided by the existing terrace and the height of the timber privacy screens, then it is viewed that that the raising of the rear garage would be acceptable. Okay, all right, I understand. Any other, Councillor Schmetterling?
Thank you, Mr. Woodhead. I didn't stop you there, but you went through you went through those drawings rather quickly. I think it was, can't remember, it was drawing number 3 or something. I'd like to see again. Before that, yes, one before that. I think it's actually after this, but yeah, okay, go forward again, please. One more. No, after that. It was an external, I thought it was some external views. Next one.
So if you're looking for the photos, they're in the application pack.
No, not the photographs. No, it was like you were comparing, and it was the outside.
Oh, so those with the
maybe
rear
this one. Yes, sorry, it was this one. Yes. So we're looking. The left is existing, and the right is proposed.
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry, so I can't zoom in any further. But you can see.
I can.
That the rear height of the existing garage is slightly lower than the parapet of the neighbouring property. So actually, when you view it from Stewart's Grove, which is kind of where this view is taken from, then actually it would be visible as a continuous kind of massing and a continuous height through.
Oh right. Stewart's Grove. I just see where that is now. I've got a map open here.
Sorry, that's at the rear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's okay. I've got a map here, so I can see what it is. Okay. So what Mr. Moreno was talking about was he was worried about the fact it's raised by a little bit, and that this would then overlook his property, his terrace. Is that correct? Is that understood correctly?
They are the concerns that Mr. Moreno has.
Okay, but this privacy screen, this privacy screen is only on the frontage. It doesn't have a return. Does it, or does it? Because I understood that screen has actually been adjusted to take into account the objection by somebody, and I see it was agreed to make it a more residential-looking screen.
If you look at this, is the proposed lower ground and ground floor levels, and it does show that the screen at 1.8 meters high would be around the terrace. It would be fully enclosed in the terrace.
Oh, sorry, it's the top. I'm looking at the top. Right, top of the picture. Yes, is that right? Sorry, it's very poorly labelled, if I may say so. So I'm looking at the top end. Yes.
Yeah. So on the right hand side at the top,
it says
which
terrace
is the rear
above the garage.
Yeah, it says the terrace, the timber decking, and the 1.8 meter vertical timber screen, the privacy screen. So that is a proposed.
Sorry, on all three sides.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can see it. Yes, I can pull it down because I'm actually using a touchscreen on a tablet, so I can manipulate this. Okay, all right, that's clear. Thank you very much. Okay, that's good. Yeah, okay.
And like I say, I mean, details of the timber privacy screen are secured by way of condition 3.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Actually, yeah, I think Dorrie, that's helpful to clarify that, because I've been wondering about that as well. I think in response to the point that was made earlier by a neighbour, I think unfortunately, it is a fact in the planning system that applicants are able to put in repeated applications. That is just something, unfortunately, we all have to just live with, and I know it is frustrating. But okay, well, thanks for Matthew. Thanks for explaining that the detail there to us. So, colleagues, if there aren't any further questions to officers, then I think the recommendation now, obviously, there's planning permission and there's list of building consent, I think, isn't there, for this? So if I can go down the table and ask, are we in favour of the recommendation to grant planning permission for this? Councillor Schmetling?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Wade?
In favour.
Councillor Woodger?
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. And I'm in favour as well, with the conditions attached. And then if we can turn to the list of building consent in the same way, Councillor Schmetling, are you in favour or against?
Chair, before I actually say anything, I've just realised there's something I left out, but I don't know whether I can put it in now or not, but I'll leave it to your discretion. I was wondering, there's a condition there about the materials. Could we make sure there's a sample of the brickwork, or is that automatic?
Well, I think that's part of the planning permission, and I think that is automatically part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
sorry about this.
No, it's all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. That is part of it already. Okay. So the list of building consent, are you in favour or against that, granting that?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
In favour.
Councillor Woodrow.
In favour, Chair.
And I'm in favour as well. Okay. So that's granted as well. Very good. Thank you very much. So if we can now move on to our final application, which is still in South Park, and that is Amberwood House. So Matt, do you want to go ahead with that when you're ready?
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
There's no sound.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute.
Matthew. Okay, all right. So we're now moving to Amberwood House, and Matthew, if you'd like to present this, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to the replacement of the main entrance door to Amberwood House. The entrance door is, Amberwood House is accessed from the private driveway, and that serves Amberwood House and Thurloe Lodge. So on the slide at the moment, you can see the existing doorway and access to the Amberwood House. And then the second slide demonstrates the existing elevation on the left-hand side in plan form, and a comparative entrance that is proposed as part of this application. So as you can see, there'll be a doming on the roof, which will be constructed in copper. It's proposed to introduce Doric pillars either side of the entrance door and replace the actual door itself. In addition, it's also proposed to introduce 2 blind windows either side of the entrance door. And again, this just shows the proposed situation in plan form. So you can see where the pillars would be located, where the door is located in relation to the facade, and again a section through the proposed development, which shows the dome coming out from the facade of the building with the pillars. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, nobody's registered to speak about this, so we move straight to questions for officers. Who'd like to go first on this?
Could somebody possibly clear up some of the comments by the objectors were about the address, and I couldn't quite work out what they were talking about. Somebody could clarify that for me?
Yeah, I can. So I think what you're referring to is the site location plan.
All right.
Which the comment was that it's 2 separate plots for Amberwood House and the road serving the 2 properties. And in the officer's report section A, it's responded to, but in effect the red line is edged and included around the entirety of the site, and includes the land upon which the development is proposed. So it is correct for validation purposes. All
right, no. But it's where Margot Fontaine used to live, wasn't it? Where's the blue plaque?
I have.
Well, ask Professor Google.
I don't know. Is the answer, Linda?
I would have thought that they would have wanted a blue plaque.
Yeah. Right. Tell me, can I ask Matthew? Tell me you say the proposal includes Doric columns, okay, but also a copper dome. What can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, I can do. So if you see here, the entranceway would propose this kind of dome above. So these are the columns which would support the dome, and in effect having a kind of a shelter over the entranceway. And the materiality, the copper materiality, would reflect the previously approved materiality. You can see there's been other development that's been approved at the application property, and so that's where the materiality has been taken from. It's also worth noting that again, condition 4 secures a sample of the natural stone and the proposed copper to ensure that they would be appropriate for the setting and for the conservation area.
Right. If we go back to what is there at present, and there was a photograph there, yeah. Tell me, do we know, is that something that's historic? Because this isn't a listed building, is it? It's surrounded by listed buildings, but it isn't actually a listed building. Yeah?
Yeah, you're correct. It's not a listed building.
Okay. All right. Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Colleagues, any other further questions about this?
Well, yeah, may I just ask, I mean, I know it's sort of discussed in the pack, but the residents, particularly, I mean, those very nearby, including one at 16A Thurloe Place, are extremely critical of the expansion of this appearance, you know, the bigger entrance and everything, grander and totally out of keeping. And yet in the dealing with the objections, it is felt, you know, the planning officers feel that it is in keeping, whereas there's these objections saying it's not in keeping with other doors in the area. For example, the 11A Thurloe Place resident says the design is not in keeping with other entrances in the area. And also, well, he also speaks about the driveway or pavement level, but I'm not sure that that's how important it is. But I mean, what's your comment then? It's pretty scathing, although they're not necessarily planning experts.
Yeah, I mean, as is set out in the officer's report in the actual main body itself, it discusses about the heritage significance of the conservation area in which the property is proposed, and obviously that kind of refers back to policy CL3, which is one of those that the application has been assessed against, and it is felt that whilst it is being kind of made slightly grander, in that actually given its setting at the end of a private roadway and kind of the visibility which is discussed again in the officer's report, that actually the changes wouldn't be harmful to the application property in effect.
Do we know what is actually Amberwood House and so on? Is it just a block with private residences?
Yes, I believe so.
What's behind the wall, in other words?
I mean, so this is kind of the rear access almost of Amberwood House itself, because I think the main building is set further away from this element.
Okay, because I've got a map here, the open street map thing, which shows you Amberwood House, Alexander. I mean, you mentioned it it's in the pack, Alexander House, and to the east of that is North Terrace, but Thurloe Close, and then there's ends somewhere in houses, and then north of that, coming off Thurloe Place, which is part of actually the main road. But I didn't realise it was actually the main road's got the funny, it's got that name for a section of it. You know, it's Cromwell Road, isn't it? And it's
sorry,
I just want
to
understand what that is. You see, that's why when I'm looking at
it. This is actually quite a. No, you're quite right. It's quite a complicated layout of buildings in that particular area, So no, it's not something which is, it is quite tricky to get your head around exactly the location of Amberwood House in relation to other buildings. But I think actually in our pack there is a proper ONS map, which I think does give us a correct layout. But it's a complicated site. You're quite right about that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other points? Okay. All right. Well, look. In that case, I think we need to make a decision on this. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission, obviously with the conditions set out. So if I can go down the line and ask people if they support the recommendation or against. Councillor Schmetling.
I agree. Yes, I'm in favour.
Okay. Councillor Wade.
Okay.
Okay, you agree. Councillor Woodrow.
In favour, Chair.
Okay, and I think on balance, I probably agree as well. It's difficult, but I think on balance I agree. So on that basis, planning permission is granted. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. That concludes our meeting. Quite a long meeting, but that's good. And thank you very much to everyone who's joined us this evening. And also just a quick note of thanks to the officers who behind the scenes make these virtual meetings happen. They work very hard, and we don't actually hear or see them, but their work is very much appreciated. So thank you very much, everyone, and good evening. Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.